miraculously, it appears that everything has perfectly worked out.
Seamless transition,
I,
one might say.
yeah, normally it's like something has to be resized, something is the wrong size, something doesn't work. Here, it's like I opened it, everything was like essentially the perfect size. Oh my God, I'm still catching my breath. First and foremost, folks, let us know if you can hear us because we changed. The driver became the passenger, although you are always the honorary driver and a very able one at that. So thanks again for holding down the fort, Robert. Its solo commentary is brutal. I really appreciate it.
Hey man, it was a good time. Chat was being very uh, participatory. We had a nice time just analyzing variations and looking at some cool tactics. And Donna, the great thing about Norway Chess is the players, they always entertain us with the types of games they're playing. So I feel spoiled just by that fact.
I feel spoiled by the fact that I get to essentially go from one party to the next, from one establishment to the next. I, of course, was commentating the second and final day of Neiman Dubov, the rematch, together with Shimanov and Russian. And what an incredible day it was. Hans was down by 3. He was tilted out of his mind. He was just like giving games away. Dubov was a point and a half away. The score is 8-5, and they're playing 18 games total. And Hans wins the match. He wins 3 in a row. The final game of regulation, Dubov is completely winning, and Hans somehow saves a rook, ending him down 2 pawns. So it's
Wow.
decided that they'll play 2 more games, 2 more sudden death games. The first one, Hans wins just incredibly. In the second one, Dubov fails to win on demand. Hans holds, and there was action. There was heat. Yesterday was pretty chill in terms of the atmosphere. Today, like they were at each other's throats, literally and figuratively. So it was awesome, but I missed you. And this is where the
Oh.
real party's at. So thanks, everybody. Hope you can hear us. And I think we're live on 3 channels.
You know, it's funny because I was receiving lots of questions of where's Danya, and I would answer the question and say he's covering the event on Levitov Chess, and I'm like, I don't know what's going on there because I'm commenting these games. My
Mm-hmm.
attention it can't be split, and they're telling me Hans won. I'm like, well, that's great. You're beating a strong player like Dubov, but I don't have any broader thoughts or more meaningful thoughts. It's like, how am I supposed to formulate an opinion when I haven't actually seen any of the games or any of the footage? It just sounds like you beat Dubov. That's amazing. If anyone beats Dubov in a match, that's a fantastic achievement. So, again, I don't really know what the purpose of that match was
Nobody
because the first
does.
one seemed dramatic enough, but cool. We can move on next chess tournament, or I should say this one, because we have a Norway chess right here and now, and that is our, at least my focus. Yours has been split, but your split duties may be no more.
And chess fans, I know you might have work, you might have meetings, but there has been so much action already the first 2 days that I can't even begin to imagine as the stakes become higher and higher, as the cost of losing a classical game increases, what awaits us in these next 8 rounds. Obviously, on the other side of the coin here, I've also been unaware of the action. I'm sure you've done an amazing job, but maybe we can start with a quick executive summary. You can take me to what you think the most interesting current position is. I'm looking here at Fabi versus Arjun. It's a very dynamic endgame. Is there something that is unfolding at a faster pace that you think we might want to capture?
Yeah, you know, this game has been interesting from the start. There was an early novelty from Fabiano, but Arjun seemed to know it, at least have it in his preparation. I would say that the Gukesh game against Hikaru Danya, that's proceeded the most because Gukesh has been better. He tried to exploit a position where Hikaru is left with an isolated pawn. But right now, it seems like Hikaru, as he often does, is defending perfectly. And I was saying earlier that I was very impressed with some of Hikaru's decision making because even if the engine says he's slightly worse, it just feels like the type of dynamic play that he thrives in. And look at that knight on c5. Done a few turns ago, that knight was on d8 and very
What?
passive. Yeah, he's been able to get his pieces out quite harmoniously. And now black is hardly worse. That a4 pawn is a target. The e6 pawn, yes, is weak, but the knight on c5, it's on an outpost. It looks like there's equality here.
You're saying Hikaru is successfully navigating a worse position. I mean, I guess there's a first for everything, you know. Like, I heard he's retiring soon. I think you should stay in this chess world a little bit longer. He might even be able to fight for the throne. I mean, If only he had a chance to match wits with the world champion, just to kind of measure himself in the chess world. Probably doesn't have a rating yet. So I'm seeing some moves highlighted in red. And like every self-respecting chess fan, I can't take my eyes off of them. So can we rewind a little bit and can we see if where Gukesh seemingly failed to squeeze more juice out of this advantage?
Sure, let's do it. I mean, just a few turns ago, it seemed like
Whoa.
Hikaru was struggling, but now he's in a position where he's trying to trade pieces. Yeah, exactly. Knight e5 was the move I was recommending, Danya, and Queen g5. Knight takes c4 was the mistake apparently, but what actually is the better move? Because it feels like Black is getting active just in time.
Man, in Russian, there's an expression. It smells like something is frying, right? It smells like something is being grilled, which means there are tactics in the air. And I'm considering ideas like f4. I'm looking at this undefended rook, knight to d7. Now, it's easy for me to just throw out a bunch of unrelated moves and just scold Gukesh for not combining them into a coherent and decisive sequence. However, there's a reason that he is the world champion. And that is because he handles these pieces a lot better than I do. Was there something concrete, or was this a conceptual mistake? You can spoil the fun for me.
Oh, I don't know, but I'm guessing it's more conceptual because in this current position, right, it looks like one where white has the static edge, but like he went knight takes c4, and then the black knight quickly got out. Was there a way to keep that knight at bay? Because queen e2, I see your move, knight b7. What's the exact response that stops knight c5?
Conceptual, right? This, again, you're absolutely right, Robert. This isn't something where, oh, it's boom, 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 and you're sort of indirectly preventing the maneuver. It's more that you're keeping this knight on a commanding post. The computer is giving h4. I would take this with a grain of salt. This is at a low depth, but it gives us a general understanding, I think, of what Gukesh missed here. Okay, queen f6, I think, is reasonable, creating a royal pin. And the queen is a royal pain. And now another mysterious stockfish move, g3. And if we do a little bit of comparing, right? We have this position currently on the board versus this position which could have been reached. Robert, you have an epiphany that you want to share.
Well, g3 is so nice because it sets up rook f4, and the black queen is forcibly misplaced because it can't go to e7 in any position because of knight g6. And so I think these types of positions, it's one where I asked this question earlier, Danya, and I feel like I now have my answer, but it's only through clever resources. I here maybe rook takes c4, like keeping more pieces on the board for your what seems like it could be a nice attack from the white side. I think that this looks like a steady plus for white, but maybe even here black should have sufficient resources to hold.
It's so easy to assume that the correct strategy involves preventing the black knight from reaching c5, but no. There's nothing you can do about that, so you accumulate the other advantages. I'd point out three factors to help us understand why this is so much better. You called it, I think, more pieces on the board favors the side with more space and more active pieces, which of course is white. The second factor is the misplaced queen, which is forcibly misplaced, as you said, by this lovely g3 rook f4 idea. And I don't know what the third factor is, but I just said three factors. It's like when you create a table in Microsoft Word and you don't know what you're going to populate it with. Better err on the side of caution. So instead of this, we see the overly materialistic knight takes c4. Now it is white who removes his knight from its active post. Hikaru immediately seizes the opportunity, gets his knight to c5 just in time. The queen can be misplaced, but not as effectively because it returns to f6 and you don't have rook f4 because that hangs both of the rooks and gets you kicked out of Norway Chess. Instead, Gukesh has to spend a tempo on connecting his rooks. There was also a threat of a fork, allowing Hikaru to drive his rook down to f4 and force favorable trades, also exploiting, by the way, the weak back rank for Gukesh. Like, there's constantly this threat of queen c1, and it looks like the advantage has evaporated in its entirety, just like that. Another disappointment.
I feel like that happens, or at least used to happen so regularly in my games where I'm like, I feel like I'm pressing, I've got that squeeze going on, and then suddenly it's just liquidation and a draw. And these top players, they are so good at staving off the first wave, the second wave, and saying you are going to have to deliver some kind of nasty knockout. And Hikaru had a show called Nakamura's Knockouts.
Oh, yeah.
Here he's the one defending tenaciously. And it's cool to show that line that you mentioned with h4 and g3 because it makes a lot of sense once you showed it to me. but it's really hard to come up with that idea yourself. Like, what is a pawn doing on h4? It seems like you're creating unnecessary weaknesses, but it was all about kicking that black queen back. It was about keeping control. Earlier today, Danya, and it's because of Magnus's game, talking a lot about the Catalan. And the Catalan's often about restricting your opponent. You give up a pawn to restrict your opponent's pieces and control squares yourself. That line that you were showing before was just like that. Like just making sure that black is forced back, white is improving piece by piece. And that was a really nice line, but difficult to spot over the board.
A great reference, a timely reference to the Catalan. I just saw a lot of the Catalan from Daniel Dubov, who put tremendous pressure on Hans Niemann with the white pieces. Hans switched to the Slav, and it definitely did not help him one bit. But even with all of his troubles with the black pieces, he was still able to mount the comeback. Of course, we saw a comeback yesterday from Hikaru Nakamura because we were sort of close to starting his obituary at some point. Like there was a point in his game with Magnus where I just thought this is a classic Magnus win. He just takes the life out of you. Hikaru's down on time. He turns it around and actually draws from a position of strength. And of course, the news headlines were dominated not by their classical game, which featured an impressive comeback, but by that insane Armageddon time scramble where Magnus, uncharacteristically, something that only seems to happen against Hikaru's opponent, to Hikaru's opponents, just freezes and forgets that Magnus, you get a 1 second increment, not on move 40, not a 1 hour increment.
That was rough. Yeah, it was uncharacteristic of Magnus to just sit that deep in thought. He says he was outcalculated, but either way, he's still in the running. It's only 2 rounds in is Magnus Carlsen. So I think we can.
No, he's done. He withdrew. Actually, don't you know?
You scared me. You just like so suddenly said that. I was like, oh, what'd I say?
Don't worry. Hans is playing Dubov, not in Stavanger.
Oh yikes! Yeah, I'm not getting involved in that one, but I will get involved in this position that Magnus has.
What a transition! Look at that is like just vintage master. That is why the thinking chess world likes you. I mean, that is just like professional commentary right there. Continue.
Well, we've been having a good time in these chats, and right now it looks like Magnus is having a good time because. Donnie, if you go back to what move number was it? Give me a second. After 19, rook f d8 in this game.
Okay, so 4 moves back, we had a Catalan with the bishops having just gotten traded, yeah.
And rook f d8 was played to stop the fork on d7, and I was saying a move like f4, queen h5, just trying to advance your pieces, gain some ground, and I love the move that Magnus played here. Yeah, queen to b1. I mentioned rook b1, but queen b1 is so nice because his whole goal was to make the knight on a5 uncomfortable and try to prevent c5 because right now black has no claim to the important squares on the board. And we can see in the next few turns in the live position how c5 had to happen, otherwise black has no actual plan. And once it did, the white queen immediately slid up to b6, which was a square previously under control. And we had a little tactic here.
Wow.
A little petit combination, right? With cd4, with rook d5 to follow.
Oh.
Well, that's what happened, right? He went cd first.
He went cd first, although he actually could have played the immediate rook d5. And dumb question, what if c4? Let's try to... is it just like knight takes c4 and cd?
Okay, but that's...
No, but okay, like, that is impossible, yeah, there's no way, yeah. Okay.
Oh, is it queen d8 somehow?
Queen d8 where?
Now.
What a move! Oh, see, I mean, your rook is hanging, the knight was formerly hanging. It's taking me a while just to, like, adjust my eyes to this, but I think you're absolutely right, Robert. Let me just show this to the viewers. C takes d5, nope, that blunders the queen. If you take the queen, the rook simultaneously recaptures moving away from the danger zone, and it's actually black who develops massive pressure on white center in the endgame. What a find. D takes c5 also doesn't work. It hangs the rook on d1, so you don't even have that. And if you remove your queen from b6, then black's rook vacates the premises. For starters, you have rook d6. Maybe even in some positions you can sack the knight on c4, as I had proposed previously. Although, no need for such shenanigans.
Although now it's increasingly tempting in some of these positions. So I'm getting that you have your tactical hat on today.
Oh, yeah.
And after cd4, white took back because queen takes a5 was met by rook d5, tactically defending the knight because the knight e5 was also loose. So that was an important variation. And Daniel, I was saying that in the current position, when I was analyzing it, I was wondering that if or when Wei Yi plays knight c6, the very forcing sequence of moves starting with queen takes b7 leaves white a pawn ahead, but we know objectively speaking, that resulting position where white's up an a pawn, it should be a hold with proper play. Not always easy to do that, especially against Magnus, but after queen b7, knight e5, lots of trades, the a6 pawn drops, white is better, no risk, playing for two results.
And we saw a decision of this kind, right? It may seem to be a very pleasant decision, but it's actually kind of annoying when the onus is on you to demonstrate precision. Arjun Erigaisi encountered several of those types of decisions against Gukesh, and almost, right? We talk a lot about Gukesh. I don't want to pile on. Lord knows there's enough blah, blah, blah when it comes to Gukesh's struggles, but he came oh so close in both the first and the second round to pulling off the unimaginable, especially yesterday. So these decisions can be quite unpleasant. Which leads me to a second thought, Robert. Is there a case to be made for either knight takes c6 or even, drastic thought, keeping the knights on the board and trying to not cash your chips in too soon, but essentially to have your cake and eat it too?
Same wavelength. That's what I was wondering. The exact same move I proposed, knight to d3. I wasn't sure in my head if knight f3 or knight d3 was better, but either way, this is good to hear from you because, yeah, e5, you're trying to take these tactical measures because strategically blocks in such trouble, and maybe e5 does do enough to hold on here. But I think the essential point that you were asking, which I think is a great question, is that Magnus probably prefer to keep the tension with material equality than to win a pawn but allow easier play and more activity from his opponent.
But something smells here. I think Wei Yi must have overlooked something, and it leads me to the next question, which is that your idea of rook d5 to meet e4 with queen d8. Clearly, for some reason, it's not as effective with the preliminary trade on d4. Why is that? Is it because it grants white the chance to fight for the c file? Is there something tactical after e4 queen d8? So is rook d5 a candidate move here for Wei Yi, who's down to 24 minutes, by the way?
Your move, rook c1, looks really strong.
Rook a c1, I assume?
Yep.
But okay, queen d8, I'm okay. Naroditsky blundering as usual. Take e4. Oh my god.
That's such a funny sound. So rook c8, queen c8. You're saying e4, queen d8 again.
Yeah, rook c8, queen c8, e4. So just to illustrate the point here, if the rook moves, you drop the knight. The rook cannot stay on the fifth rank, no defended squares. So we borrow from Robert Hess's playbook of crazy defensive moves. And rook d5 was played. Sometimes the DGT. Okay, double question mark, shut up. There we go.
Well, I think what happened, it initially was a blunder, whatever, like the probably stopped on d6 or something. And so then the question marks stay put, at least until the board corrects itself and the DGT sliding pieces. What happened?
Yeah, no. I'm just like disaster dodge. But this illustrates that you should be looking at the position with your own brain first and foremost, because we saw in Erigaisi Gukesh. Yeah, on the one hand, yes, Gukesh came very close to drawing, all credit to him. But realistically, practically speaking, I feel like it was nearly impossible given the time situation. If you were just staring at the eval bar, it would have been hard to follow what I think is the real narrative of the game. And it would have been much easier to assume that Arjun Erigaisi didn't know what he was doing and, was playing like a clown, which he absolutely was not. His mistakes were totally understandable and never lost the practical chances, which remained huge up until Gukesh made the decisive mistake.
For sure. Now that was, I was saying earlier, an epic endgame, 2 in a row for Gukesh. Unfortunately, he was in the losing end of both. But Magnus wants to regain some of that form from that first round against Gukesh. And the problem for Black in this position is that you're just going to be squeezed. Like, you don't actually have a plan. Your plan is to make sure that you just don't blunder anything, but you don't actually get activity of your own. So I do like your move, rook c1, that you mentioned, Danya. I think that's a very good starting point. And when we were looking at these like queen d8 or rook trade on c8 lines, what I'm just wondering is, what if white kind of does nothing, like plays rook b1?
Very Magnus style move. pressing on the b7 pawn, immobilizing the knight on c4, on a5. Can I get away with knight c4? Or do you have some...
Oh, I think I just completely overlooked that, so I don't have anything particularly clever. I just allowed you to.
Yeah, Robert.
Wait, so knights.
Wow,
Wait, but
what
knights.
a blunder. Oh, unacceptable.
Knight c4. So trade. Queen b7.
And queen a8, rook b8.
That's what I'm wondering. But the king always is g6 to run away to.
To run away to, but where you go, I follow. And it's hard to say in those types of scenarios. I always feel like I'm bad at evaluating the danger level of this type of attack, where the king is driven out sort of into the open, but it's very unclear if you actually have a follow-up. Because even if you play rook h8, king g6, if we visualize queen g8 to h7, big deal. Like, congratulations. King steps forward to f6. Not to mention that white's king isn't exactly feeling the vibes after something like queen c2, setting up the very real prospect of some sort of perpetual check. Definitely something Wei Yi has to worry about, and probably not the only thing he has to worry about.
Wow, really good comment though in your Twitch chat. But after the knight trade on c4, what about intermediate move rook b4 before taking on b7?
Before taking on b7. And here I come with the bad puns, and here Twitch comes with the excellent suggestions. I totally missed that.
Same here. That's a really lovely move. Just calmly. Now you take... I don't think that black has enough checks. You have one, but when the king goes to g1, the b1 square is covered.
Yeah, that's really important. Obviously, if there was some sort of pattern here where you could go queen c1 to e4, that would be perpetual. But Magnus would win this. Like, if he reaches a position with a healthy, stable extra pawn and zero counterplay, given the time situation and his hunger after yesterday's Armageddon, you could tell that he was waiting to get home and start preparing. Leave me, just like, let me go, and I'm going to show y'all tomorrow what happens when you come at the king and miss. And Shimanov actually referenced this during the commentary. He was trying to translate it because that was the title of his recap of round one in Russian. And if you come at the king, you best not miss. Of course, it doesn't have the same, it's not as mellifluous.
Which is a lovely word, by the way.
Thank you.
You know, this position that you have on the analysis board is a much better version of the previous lines where white just like took the b7 pawn, the a6 pawn, and was up a single pawn. It's actually much more complicated, right? More material left, just sort of vaguer plans for black to be able to execute. So I think that this, of course, would be a better version of a pawn-up position like we saw before.
Yeah, shows us the importance of these subtle factors, like the opening of a particular file and its impact on the position. If I play rook ac1 and black yields the c file, you also might be unwittingly yielding an entire knight. So after rook ac1, if you play a move like rook cd8, I think it's just good knight. Well, not literally, this is a very bad knight. I'm saying good knight to Wei Yi after e4. And it's not on his bingo card to lose a second game in under 30 moves after yesterday's fiasco against Fabiano Caruana. So I don't know what the lesser evil is here with black, if there even is a lesser evil, or if it's just to play queen d8. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Should we be moving our d1 rook instead of our a1 rook?
Here we go, this again. Why?
Because we have two open files here, C and B file. So queen d8, I'm going to go rook a to b1, I think.
Oh, wow. So you're going for an endgame advantage instead, because like rook takes c1 doesn't fail tactically, right? You have to take the queen, then you trade rooks on c1, and you're claiming that your advantage is even greater than the advantage afforded by, you know, the more prosaic and materialistic option. Yes?
I think so. Yeah, I think this, I mean, rook c7 is such an automatic move, and f6, there's always just knight d3 type of ideas.
Almost works. It comes very close, but there is a Forkovich. Hans Poligrafovich is what we were calling him on e7. So just so close.
And Arkady Forkovich?
Oh my God. No, that is unbeatable. That is just unbeatable, and your predictions are similarly unbeatable. Just essential to watch this commentary and not any of the other amateur shows. I can tell you for a fact nobody predicted the rook on d1 coming to c1. And one of the hardest dilemmas in chess, which rook to put on a square.
There's just two open lines for the white rooks. So we looked at the other line, and then suddenly I was like, wait a second, why are we choosing the A1 rook? And it was given an exclamation point, which means it was the only move to keep that white advantage. But we're getting some questions. Can we go to the Fabi game? That probably means that there was a mistake by Arjun Erigaisi, given that it's Fabi on the clock.
Things are heating up in a big way. Gukesh Hikaru, I would predict a draw, but we'll keep an eye on that one. But this is definitely where the brunt of the action is unfolding as we see a black knight landing on d2. I'm so captivated by that knight that I am taking a while to switch both boards to this game. So what's the pawn count? Currently, Fabi is down a pawn. But the fact that I only looked at that 5 minutes after having sort of first seen this position tells you that it's probably not the most important factor. This knight is playing with some serious fire. I'm just going to turn on the AC so that there will be no fire. And keep going. I'll just take 15 seconds. I'm hearing you.
Go for it. No, the knight is going for it, trying to wrap around to b3. In some positions, you could even consider going knight c4, trading off knights. But this looks very weird because the black king is out in the open. So at the very least, there's probably, and we'll wait for Danya to come back, but at the very least, there's probably a rook c1 to d1 and then knight c4 check maneuver. That's at least a draw for white. So Fabiano's in no risk whatsoever. Now it's about, can he find a precise continuation that takes advantage of the fact that knight d2 was not best? I mean, it's given a question mark. Neither player knows that. Arjun wouldn't have played knight d2 if he thought it was a mistake. And for Fabi, he needs to now seize the moment. And I think rook c to d1 with knight c4 check to follow, it's clear that that's at least a draw. And I'm going to wait for Donan to get back so we can figure out.
Sorry, I snuck in a few bites of my Turkish lamb bowl.
Ooh.
It's funny, the new place, delicious. The owner hands me the pomegranate sauce that I first tried when I was 3 years old. And he starts explaining that it's very bitter and you need to be careful. I'm like, girl, my mom is from Baku. And I even know the Azeri word for pomegranate, which is also the Arabic word for pomegranate, nar. Not to be confused with nur, which I think means light. So, a little while until I can commentate in that language, but give me some time. Okay, sorry, not to derail the conversation.
I believe that you will be able to. You're great with accents, with impressions, and also language. But we're just talking about this position with knight to d2, and I was saying that at the very least, white has rook c1 to d1. The knight has to go to b3, only move that doesn't lose the game.
Agreed.
And then knight c4 check back to e5 check is a draw at minimum for white.
Yeah, so you have a draw in your pocket, which is always a reassuring feeling. Again, figuratively speaking, I feel like I have to make that clarification. Now, what are the other options that are maybe not as delicious as this lamb kebab, but come close? There is the move knight e3, which runs into d4. Unfortunately, the bishop is protected. So is there anything else in this position, or would knight c4 be a sign that white is acquiescing to a draw?
Well, you're always taught to repeat once, right? So knight c4 back to e5. You can then think what to do after that.
Oh,
but
g4? What do you make of this?
Bishop c2, you have knight c4 check, king c6, rook e6 check.
That's exactly my idea. So why bishop c2, first of all? Because bishop g6, you have the same idea, but also you're giving white extra options. And it's unthinkable to move the bishop back to c8. Maybe bishop e6, but we'll get to that. Let me just illustrate this idea. King c6 and the extra resource, rook to e6. Amazing how white's pieces, like a boa constrictor, wrap themselves around black's king, simultaneously coordinating themselves. Wow. What a line, and this would be catastrophic to my eyes for black. Actually,
wow, and bishop
here even better.
Bishop g6 is similarly bad, by the way, because the same thing, knight c4, rook e6 check. So the bishop has to stay, but here bishop e6, knight c4, and your king has nowhere to go.
Oh crap! Because king d7, there's a fork. Forkovich. King e7. There is
Rook
like
d5.
600 moves. Here, rook takes d5 or knight b6 or d5 falls with very deleterious effect on the position. Wait, so what does black do here?
So maybe your bishop c8, you said not to be played, but maybe that's the move?
Maybe it's the move to be played.
But that's...
Bishop c8. How could I ever not advocate for such a
Well,
move?
you know what's funny is like rook takes d5, rook d1 is like almost checkmate in some positions, but the knight can obviously block on d4. I'm getting super hype about checkmating sacrifices, but what about knight c4 check and then just bishop takes g7, by the way?
Very utilitarian and probably very strong. Because the king has to step onto c6. Again, you run into this problem where the d5 pawn is constantly hanging. And now you're paying a very direct price for disconnecting the rooks.
And white's pawns look very quick.
Fork, 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 fork. What if I go rook g8, claiming that
Just
I'm hitting
90
two of your pieces at the same time?
95 back.
And if I sack my king? Just kidding. Just kinging.
You should always sack. There might be mate.
Ah, very good. I see what you did there. You're walking a very thin wire here, my friend.
This looks good for white, right? You can always make the knight c4 draw if you need. Knight f7 check is in the air.
Boom. Boom. This is hype. That's not a grammatically healthy sentence, but you get the point.
It is grammatically healthful.
I called Neiman a hype factory, but I think this position's a hype factory.
Yeah, this looks very promising. And he went rook c to d1, didn't he?
On the board, as Peter Lecco likes, on the board. Wow, dramatical entertainment and action in this position. And will we see g4 from Fabiano? Fabiano, he never says Fabi. It's Fabiano, will we see g4? Where does the bishop go to? Unbelievable, dramatical, wow. Robert, this is incredible. He's coming to Charlotte.
Oh, that's awesome. You get to hang out with him.
I'm gonna extract as many memeable and memorable quotes as possible. Imagine Lecco in real life. It's like Lecco in Zoom, but times 100. He lives fully. Let's put it this way.
Have you worked on his laugh now that you have the Wesley laugh down?
I don't think I can picture Peter. I know he laughs often. He's experiences a lot of joie de vivre, but I can't picture the laugh, replay his laugh in my head because I've been working on the Wesley laugh for so long that I can't picture anybody else's laugh.
Oh my goodness. I don't know when you started learning that, but it just cracks me up every time.
I mean, that's what it's working as intended. I appreciate it.
It just is so the funniest part to me is that you actively listen to clips of Wesley laughing.
Oh yeah, but it's you can find it in every interview if you know what you're looking for. Although, of course, oftentimes when you're looking for something in particular, it's like a needle in a haystack. Suddenly he's the most serious man in the universe, and suddenly he's stopped laughing every single time you listen to him. You know how those things tend to work. It's like when you try to look for a song with a certain lyric, and you're sure it's a top 100 hit, and you just cannot find it.
I feel like you need to go on a Cameo and just offer just people to pay for your impressions because it's so funny.
I appreciate it. I mean, it's nice to discover a hidden talent. I wish that I could trade that talent in for less blundered pieces. But Fabiano Caruana ain't blundering any pieces here. G4 is on the board as well, and a big test for Arjun Erigaisi. He's going to find Bishop C8. This is a process of elimination thing, and top players almost never commit unforced errors when there's a concrete decision like this and every other move loses in 2 or 3 moves, which it does, I think. Which it does.
So Bishop C8, the problem is that G7 falls, right? Bishop E6 just loses on the spot. Bishop C2 and Bishop G6 have the same exact problem, that the E6 square is no longer under black's control. So bishop c8 and bishop d7. You just take on d7, take on d5 with check at the very least.
Yeah, and drop back to d3 with tempo. That looks atrocious. No, you have to play bishop c8. I mean, also because bishop c8 is always the best move when it is available. Except when it's the second best move.
I just don't really see how black intends on defending. Is the essential claim that, okay, white's gonna take g7, bring the knight back to e5, all that good stuff, and then the game just goes on and you'll fight to the bitter end?
In my chat, Petty Shrimp is requesting me to switch between Wesley and Daniel Naroditsky in the same sentence, which I definitely can do, but you're slowly discovering that I'm a psychopath, so I think I need to like cease and desist any further activities on that front for my own good.
Oh my goodness. It's just I don't even know how I'm supposed to react to any of this.
You're supposed to do a React Andy and put it on your YouTube channel in today's video. That's the thing with Dania, right? Dania just masks his lack of understanding of the position. You know, these like mindless impressions, right? That's the thing. Speaking of, how is Mr. Nakamura doing, and the others, and the ladies?
Okay, well, Hikaru is just worse, and I mean he's been worse in his position for a long time, but now it's just queen and knight ending.
I'm just gonna quickly show how nasty this endgame is, and it's gotten much nastier. What happened here? Can we just briefly run through? Because we were like, again, we were starting to write a chapter about Hikaru coming back and equalizing from a dubious position, and suddenly, once again, things get really unpleasant. So apparently rook d8, this totally natural move. I mean, Tamaya is just exchange all of the rooks. The defending side usually favors, exchanges usually favor the defending side in such cases. Apparently not here, Robert. What do you make of this? How do we make this make sense?
What was the better move?
There were actually two options. You could play a6, which is the concrete move. Obviously b6, and it looks like case closed. But now you play rook d8. I mean, it looks unthinkable to like allow this pawn to reach b6. Of course, the point is that if you trade on d8, the pawn is now undefended and it will be surrounded and picked off, given the fact that white just didn't have time to make some luft. Wow, knight b3. Look at this move. Wow, this is an incredible tactical idea because the back rank is so weak and somehow it works. If you play knight b3, white picks up the knight, protecting d1. If you pick up b6, somehow white picks up both pawns with check and lives to tell the tale because the queen can block on f1. I would say this is already a draw, objectively. Yes. Like, white shouldn't be able to win this. But there is the obvious move, knight to b7. Unmissable, of course. And the point is you just step away to h8, and somehow the threat of queen d1 will eventually force white to give up the b6 pawn.
And if you go back, Danya, instead of knight b3, if white played b7, is the point that black has knight takes b7 somehow there?
Even queen to b6, simpler move. Well, simpler in air quotes. And you just can't defend this square and this pawn at the same time.
Nice.
But come on, that's like totally absurd. And I mean, I would rule out a6 in like 5 seconds. You can also play queen c1, yeah.
Even that, okay, never mind. I would say that position that you were just showing, like with a6, b6, rook d8, all this stuff, that b7, queen b6 at the end, it kind of looks like queen c2 might work for white because you're covering the checkmate and you're trying to get to c8, but that black knight just takes everything and returns to the back rank.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. I mean, even b7 here is totally missable, that you can play, first of all, queen c1. You can play, second of all, knight takes b7 right away is a more crazy geometry, and white loses after queen takes c6. Look at this line. Like, king, no matter where you turn, there's beautiful lines galore. And I would say the biggest factor is the back rank. Like, this is the refrain. But the painful thing for Hikaru, I think, is the second equalizing option is more findable. It's to give a check, to divert the queen back to c3, chasing the knight away from a5, and then to step immediately on the gas pedal. Again, an easy move to convince yourself is bad because of b6. But I think here it's easier for people to observe that the b7 square is fairly safely protected, while the path for the black a pawn is quite clear. So here it's actually Hikaru who would have the initiative, and the position is dynamically equal. I mean, white can bail out like this, but okay, rook a6, time to agree to draw.
I always loved dynamic equality because in the old books they would just put like equal and that was it, right? It just or the symbol and it's like that's it, no more need to analyze. And you're like, I think this is just getting started. But this position is very difficult to calculate. And Hikaru's decision to play rook d8, by the way, and trade off the rooks, and what happened in the next couple turns where Gukesh has put his pawn on h4 just to give his king some luft. Like the problem for black, as you're pointing out, there are numerous. No, a6 queen e5, I think.
But I think this is what Hikaru missed. This is like insanely deep. So I go knight d3. And
queen b8 and ba.
Oh, ba. Are you sure about this ba move? I know you like British Airways, but like, okay, takes.
Okay, a7.
Chekashvili. And then it's a dead-endishvili after king h2, yeah? Are we
I believe so.
Takes? Queen.
You don't have the e4 square for your knight.
I mean, I'd be praying to like 5 gods here if I were playing this against Hikaru, but I think I get away with it. Yeah, knight g4, king g3. I was also seeing out of the corner of my eye that the computer was proposing queen to f8, which is...
Ooh!
More geometry.
That's sick.
That is why artificial intelligence will prevail over us all in the near future.
That's so awesome. Actually, I was thinking, obviously not about this, so to be clear, but I was thinking that h4, you're clearly setting up some kind of h5, get your knight to g6, threaten some sort of checkmating nets. That's way nicer. Queen f8, knight e7 combination.
But the pawn on h4 is implicated. It has its role to play in restricting the king's evacuation route to g5. Not that that would help, but it makes it even more convincing. And I can bet you a silver dollar that Hikaru, from a distance, he was like, okay, rook d8, I trade. Yeah, Gukesh is going to land a knight on c6, but I'm going to have this constant threat of a6, and that's going to force Gukesh to like bail out, right, by like moving the knight away. But this beautiful tactic, and Gukesh obviously sees it, he makes luft, controls the g5 square, and sets up this incredible tactical refutation all in one move. Hikaru is now in even more trouble, I think, than he was against Magnus, given the trend of the game.
I agree with that, because there aren't even that many moves to make. Like, what options do we have for black here? So a6 we just rejected because of queen e5. King h7, queen c2 check at a minimum is going to be a problem.
If I wait, what is the like killer here? Is it queen e3?
Queen e3 looks pretty good, but queen b6
exactly what I was intending. But I think knight e7, like some combination of a check like this, sets up a host of mating ideas.
All right, but the b5 pawn is hanging in some of these positions, right? So king f7.
Yeah, I literally don't even care.
Knight king f7, knight c8, queen c7.
Queen f3.
Looks very strange.
Queen f3, queen a8. I mean, what the hell?
But that looks odd. I don't know. Maybe it works, but something about that looks
odd.
Right.
But even that works.
I hear you. You even, it's Steven.
Prime territory for some math puns. We've been talking about geometry.
Oy. Look what we've started here.
Yeah. Well, I think it is of integral importance to cover all of the action as it unfolds. So we can leave Hikaru to choose the lesser evil as he sees it.
He's down 10 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, the time pressure, again, you can't say it enough. There's no sudden death, much to the chagrin, I think, of the slower players like Gukesh. And in lieu of that, there is an Armageddon in the event of a draw. So the rating is not affected, but the point totals are.
Donnie, you missed an opportunity.
Okay, point totals are Armageddon. What opportunity did I miss?
The Mikhail chagrin.
Oh my gosh, I wasn't even thinking. I mean, that requires a knowledge of chess history. Who are you? Who else are you going to bring out of the grave? Freaking, I don't know. Lowenthal, Johann Lowenthal, Howard Staunton, D'Artagnan, and the Three Musketeers.
In the near future, I definitely will bring them back.
Just take off that iron mask already. All right, Count of Monte Cristo. What about the women? Bishop c8 has been found by Arjun Erigaisi. And we already have a draw. Wow, so Muzichuk and Leiting J already drew, and Anna has already won the Armageddon.
Yes, they
Jeez.
drew in the Armageddon as well. And I was saying, Danya, Muzichuk has been playing great chess as of late. She won the Women's Grand Prix event. And this game that you have up, I can see now, the one of Humpy Canero, this has been really bad for Black from the start, and it clearly hasn't gotten much better.
Sarah is getting taken to school here. We don't have to dwell on this for long, but this was a Carlsbad structure where White has just punctured massive weaknesses all across the board. This pawn on d5 is painful to look at. Sarah is trying to counteract that with attacks of her own, but I feel like Humpy is spoiled for choice here. She's going to win this game.
Humpy has just been dominating this game from the start. Black's barely had moves to make. The knight that was on e5 was just, earlier was very imposing. It's gone now, but look at Black's king, lacking defenders. And as you're pointing, e4, just opening the position even more. Pawns will collapse. Looks just overwhelming for White, and Black has all her pieces on the last rank there.
Yeah, I mean, top players like to talk about the effect of getting lucky early on your tournament chances. And obviously that first round, Humpy got a gift in the mail from her compatriot Vaishali, who played a fantastic game only to succumb at the last moment. First squandering her advantage, and then on the very next move blundering checkmate in time pressure. And, once you win a game like that and you get your feet under you, sometimes a player can just become an unstoppable force, but it's still very early in the tournament. Let's go back, I think, because the Ju and June Vaishali game will go to Armageddon. I think that's a very lifeless position. For once, Vaishali is playing stable chess.
Yeah, usually we get just tremendous activity from her game. So which game do you want to return to? Because Humpy in the driver's seat, that one looks, I don't want to say clear because there's still chances, but you went back to Magnus' game, it appears.
Yeah, we had it. By the way, I think on the topic of women's chess, Bibisara, I read somewhere, received her won her third norm, and will be the second grandmaster, female grandmaster from Kazakhstan after, I think, Abdul Malik. So big, huge achievement, big congratulations. She is not playing in this event, but I'm sure will be a participant of many subsequent Norway chesses, as well as all of the top female events.
I think she's very well suited for this event because she's a multiple-time Women's World Blitz champion. She's now been able to obtain the Grandmaster title. She played super well in Sharjah. She's had a number of great performances, and the quicker the time control, I think, the better she often does.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, took the words out of my mouth. Great Blitz player who often competes in Title Tuesday. She has a bright future indeed. We wish her the best of luck and a hearty congratulations. In the meantime, it is too early to congratulate Magnus with vintage positional effort, because if we rewind a little bit, you called it Rook dc1 played, Queen d8 was played, and Queen to b4, Magnus keeping the tension. Rook to c7, Wei fighting insofar as he has the territory to do it for the c-file. Excellent move. And Magnus parrots him with Rook c3, obviously intending to double on the c-file, but it looks like Wei faked him out. It's like he pump faked him, and then suddenly he's like, boop, take the rook, drop the other one back to d6, and let's not forget, Magnus has opted for a positional advantage rather than an extra pawn. And by its very definition, a positional advantage is like contingent on temporary factors that eventually need to be transformed into something tangible, because the position's not going to win itself.
Danya, I had a tactical line that doesn't work, but you would appreciate. That this Rook d6 idea that is now played, that if instead of, let's see, go back before Rook c3 was played.
Okay, here we go.
So I was thinking that if instead black had taken on c1,
Yeah.
so we get rook c1, rook d6, like the whole thing to get knight c6 in. There might I thought queen takes d6
Oh,
worked
oh, and it
because,
sort of does.
but not in the way you wanted to, right? Because king h7, rook h8 check, and then knight takes f7. That would have been sick.
That's something like Nihal would find in a bullet chess championship game, but amazing how these queen f8 resources spoil the party. Yeah, this is big boy stuff here. And here Black would survive into the end game and potentially even have some winning chances, but just a lovely find by you, Robert. Well worth showing. So I want to understand, the computer was critical of this move, rook c3. Was there something clearly better than that? Or is it just some like boring computer line? Yeah,
I will.
boring computer line. H4. Why H4? What is significant about this? Who knows? But it's apparently H4, just keeping the tension. And if black fights for the c5, okay, this is obviously what Magnus missed. There is this insane move E4. Just ignoring the rook on c1 is hanging. Who cares? If black tries the desperado, rook takes c5, then of course first you take on c7, then you win an exchange. And if black accepts the gift, it turns out that when all is said and done, the pawn moves to d5, blocking the knight from escaping from a5. And the knight will simply be lost on a5, given the threat of d6. It's ridiculous. Isn't that ridiculous?
It is very. I'm just trying to figure out like the nuances here, and I think part of it is that in the game that we see happening right now, right, f6
Boom, boom.
kicks the knight out, and that's what Wei needs to get his own knight back in the game successfully at some point, or play rook c6, queen d5, things like that. If the white pawn were already on h4, Danya, then white can play knight g6, which is not what black wants to see. That knight sets up checkmating nets, just like in the Gukesh game against Hikaru. So many of these positions, right, that knight g6, knight e7 check, all sorts of ideas here where the black pieces are not on their optimal squares, but that was needed. The pawn going up to h5 to cement that knight in there.
It's a combination of two factors. You called it. The pawn being able to reach h5, but also the queen being displaced back to c3 is also more significant than it appears, because if Wei you would have done something similar, the queen on b4 affords white endless tactical opportunities, not least of which is the immediate win with rook c8. Of course, with the queen on c3, you don't have those options. The queen, as Yasser likes to point out, is best often in the supporting actress sort of general directing the troops from behind, symphony conductor. There's a endless supply of analogies here, but all of them make the same point, that with the queen on c3, that greatly limits white's ability to do any of that. I think white is still slightly better. I don't think there's a GM on this earth. Perhaps Andres Adorian, but he is on a different earth. Who would prefer the black pieces here? I think black is okay, but the pressure continues. I don't think Wei Yi is resting on his laurels and, sitting back in satisfaction. I think he realizes that the defensive task awaiting him with 11 minutes for the rest of the game is still a very daunting one.
It is daunting, and that's a good word to use, not just for this game and for Wei Yi's defense, but for Hikaru's and for Arjun Erigaisi's. I mean, the players with the black pieces in this round, they are struggling mightily. They're down on the clock in the case of Wei Yi and Hikaru, and in the case of Arjun, he may be ahead on time, but he's no longer ahead in terms of material. And this is the exact variation we were looking at before, and white has to be much better here. It always has a draw in the pocket if Fabi would ever want that, but he's of course playing for a win.
I think player comparisons are kind of a lost art, and in the age of sort of a universal playing style, it's very, very difficult to meaningfully compare players across generations. But Arjun increasingly sort of reminds me of Victor Korchnoi in the sense that he's kind of a provocateur type, and also not a coincidence that Korchnoi was an inveterate French player. The French is the perfect opening for a player of their type. Arjun loves to grab material and call his opponent's bluff. Victor Korchnoi, in most chess circles, literally famous for that. And occasionally, if things don't go right, they can go catastrophically wrong. And so Arjun is teetering here. They're essentially playing a rapid game. How bad is the situation, and where is the danger going to come from? Is it black's king that suffers? Is it the d5 pawn that's going to be lost? And what is White's response to rook g8? Is it that knight e7, knight f7, sorry, knight e5, knight f7 maneuver that I briefly mentioned before we transitioned?
Well, my response is that I've got another name pun that you missed out on. You were calling Korchnoi a provocateur. I thought you could have called him a Daniele Provocaturo.
Oh my goodness. Provocaturo. I mean, your brain works, me brain no work that fast.
Well, just, trying to cite all the grandmasters from around the globe from this generation and past ones.
Let me tell you this. Your pun Brunello is very high.
Well, let's I don't even know which game to turn to, Danya, because all the games are getting more intense. Hikaru still hasn't moved, and he's down to 12 and a half minutes to Gukesh's 33 and a half. Wei Yi is moving, and Magnus will have to prove if he has anything left in the tank to try and win that game. And of course, the game between Fabi and Arjun remains sharp. And the big question is, what's Arjun's follow-up to giving away the g7 pawn? He was kind of forced into that after he misstepped with knight d2 and then knight over to b3. But how does Arjun survive a position like this? Because his pawns seem weak, and White's pawns seem quite quick on the king side.
Yeah. I mean, your gift for beating the world champion is black against a world champion challenger who still harbors ambitions to one day accede to the chess throne, and is completely justified in harboring those ambitions. Fabi, he's done such a good job of remaining relevant, right? Of weathering the crests and valleys that are inevitable to anyone's chess career, perhaps with the exception of Magnus. Aren't a lot of dips in that rating graph or that biography. But for Fabi, just even in this tournament, loses that incredibly painful game to Hikaru, immediately comes back and just wipes Wei Yi off the board and is one mistake away. I really think black has to be perfect here, because one more mistake, one more tactical oversight, and you won't live to tell the tale.
I'm with you. And, while that may be true for Arjun here, he's going to have to play accurate moves from here on out. A lot of people in chat are getting worried for Hikaru, and I do mirror that sentiment. I'm looking at his time. He has not moved in a long while, and he senses the danger, Danya. He knows that if he makes one mistake here, the game could be over, because h4, that's not just the only reason isn't just luft. It's like, let me actually go to war. I'm not just making luft, I'm going to war. h5, knight e5, knight g6, queen getting in for some sort of checkmate. It's like, this looks scary, and it feels difficult to make even a single move for black. And I'll be honest, Anya, I didn't see this move. I would never play it myself, but I looked. Like, why is Hikaru thinking so much? There's one move that keeps the evaluation the same. It's knight a4, which is an absolute joke.
And a joke that Hikaru might be telling us pretty soon, because if there is someone capable of finding such a move, it probably is Hikaru. And Hikaru sometimes tells the computer what to think rather than the other way around. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, for Gukesh, a win in this game, first of all, what a twist that would be in our Norway Chess thriller, but how many wonders that would do for his confidence level after losing the first two games, to shut up some of the narratives that spout from the mouths of overeager journalists and the like. That would be a completely unanticipated turn, especially given that Hikaru seemed to have things under control just a few moves ago. Queen to d6. He hasn't found it. And to what extent does this diminish his hopes of saving the game?
Well, I see on the live board, the evaluation is quite high up there for White. So it may already be objectively winning, and knight takes a7 feels fairly obvious as a first choice, because I'm taking your pawn, I'm creating a passer for myself. Danya, what is Hikaru's idea here?
I mean, maybe the idea is to pretend like he has an idea. I think it's queen e7 and queen takes h4, picking off on the pawn via double attack. The problem is I'm not sure the h4 pawn is worth the paper it's printed on. So let's put this on the board. Could this be what Hikaru is relying on?
Okay, knight c6 back, I would assume.
Okay, so I take on h4. But again, there's this like queen e5 resource.
Yeah, queen e5 is always a problem because you will never get your checks that you need on the diagonal once my king goes to h2. And there's all sorts of queen b8, knight e7 ideas that you mentioned earlier. Now, queen b8, game over.
Oh, you can't go here because of how fast does this happen? I think it was Capablanca who first sung the praises of, and really talked about what the queen and knight are capable of. Not quite over. I have e5. But you can just take it.
Oh yeah, because queen f5 if you take on b5.
And look at the merry-go-round. Now the game is over, or it would be over, were this to be reached, because the queen will reach. All roads lead to Rome here.
That's a brutal position for Hikaru to face, even on material, but losing by checkmate. So queen d6 is a mistake, but Danya, knight a4 was such a ridiculous ask for any player to put your knight voluntarily on the rim. That knight on c5, such an important defender of the e6 pawn and some key squares in the center. I mean, it doesn't even look like it does anything, but I guess knight c3 just to pester white's pieces enough, and there may be some sort of mechanism with queen d1 in the future for black.
Isn't it crazy how black mirrors the idea in this line? I think knight c3, sack the pawn, and then suddenly after knight e2, it is white who is faced, maybe not with the same level of urgency, but still the threats of queen g1 are formidable enough to dissuade white from going for this. What do you see?
Queen a8
on. Oh my, no, but knight e7, queen d6, and then at the end, white has queen e4.
That's a crazy line.
I mean, it's like some MC Escher drawing.
I didn't see queen d6. Great reference, by the way. I didn't see queen d6. I just thought that the queen on a8 covers g2, which is really important for our viewers to note that black can start trying to checkmate white, but the white king can escape out to g4, and then the queen on a8 covers that very previously vulnerable square, but one that is now defended.
The world champion is all about kings escaping a barrage of checks. Unfortunately, here he would actually be the side escaping, the side putting out the wire tweet. Although something tells me Gukesh is not the personality type to do that. I'm not, by the way, sure that this is convincing after h5, but we've gone pretty far into this line, so this will remain behind the scenes forever. The upshot, what is the upshot? The upshot is he misses this move, which was impossible. We shouldn't hold his feet to the fire for that. And if Gukesh just takes on a7 and doesn't overcomplicate, I mean, it's going to take a major miracle. I think even if the time situation were flipped, I'd be pretty pessimistic here.
I just think that there are a lot of forcing moves here that just favor white, right? Queen e5, threatening the queen b8 checks, and the black king's actually the one in danger. So you're taking white's h-pawn, which is an important asset, because we saw so many variations with h5 and the knight getting into g6. So I understand why Hikaru is going for this type of position, but unfortunately that outside pass pawn, and if queens ever get traded, I think that white's just definitely winning.
Yeah, and sometimes when you try to defend positions like this, the panic sets in when you go through all of your reasonable candidate moves and you rule all of them out, and then you start doing the loop, right? Going down the same pass again and again and again in the hopes that you will discover some trick, some cause for optimism, and at some point you just have to close your eyes and pray. So it might be the case that Hikaru knows this is losing and just doesn't see anything better. But I wouldn't get too worried if I'm a Gukesh fan. I think he's taking the time to make sure that, he knows Hikaru. He knows that he hasn't been in the best form. And so I think he's accommodating for that just by chilling out, mentally preparing himself for this potentially final phase of the game where he needs to be ultra accurate.
Wow. And I mean, this one is turning, it seems, in Gukesh's favor. If we zoom out of this one, Danya, sure. The Fabi game against Arjun, big changes on that board.
Whoa!
Look what Arjun has done. He gave up his rook for that knight. This, at least optically, looks really bad for black, but the f3 pawn is under attack. Bishop takes g4 ideas to use that rook on a8 and get that bishop that's sitting there on f8, but it doesn't feel like enough. I mean, this has to be good for white, right?
Feels like black's position is falling apart, and it also feels like white has two rooks and black has one, and that's because he does. But black has two c-pawns and white has none. So Fabi has to be accurate. My first question, Robert, is, okay, let me just show how this was reached. And we haven't actually had that many moves. It's just, it looks like there's been a lot of moves. There's actually been one, which was actually just the immediate DC. What if white goes king f2? Like, what is the actual idea here for Arjun? Because if you play bishop g4, can I get away with a dastardly bishop takes c5? Does that pan out tactically? Probably not, actually.
You just king takes c5 even, or knight takes f3 might.
No, king c5 or e5.
Oh,
but actually the problem. Oh, knight f3. Aha, so bishop c5, knight f3, and yeah, maybe there's nothing convincing here. Yeah, my apologies.
You're forgiven. Just this once, though.
Never again. Okay, so what do I do instead? What about bishop e7? Let me propose something simpler.
And then would have just like bishop e6 or something?
Rook d4.
Oh, no, you've... I have many pawns, but you're winning a piece, so I just blundered that. I thought you were going to try to go rook e5, and I got worried about that. And I was trying to meet that with bishop to d5, but I understand that I blundered rook takes d4 there.
I mean, you can take on f3, and I was planning to take on d4. I'm actually not... I wouldn't be like ultra comfortable going for this, but the presence of the h-pawns, as one Robert Hess would point out, I think, if only he was with us during this show. Oh, wait a second. I think is the potentially deciding factor, unless I'm missing something tactical. The pawns are too slow, I think.
So rook e8, bishop b4, you're saying?
Yes. This must be technically winning, right?
So rook e1, bishop e1, king d5. Not very clear to me.
For black, technically winning, of course. I mean, c3, king c4, and you're like, wait, what? King e2?
King e4?
Yeah, this is why I would never write an endgame book. Oh, wait a second.
King d2?
That's an excellent move. Dream moves.
But king f3?
Oh my goodness. a5, h5? How is white the one in Zugzwang? I didn't sign up for this. Okay, so we've gone pretty deep into the line. I'm honestly learning that these types of endgames, I just take it for granted that I'm going to get my bishop out and start and like poke a hole in your pawn chain. But that process is much harder than it sounds.
This is such a ridiculous position. Yeah, the end game that is, of course, forced. They're definitely going to go down this line.
Of course. No, but okay.
There's no other way.
Apparently, according to the computer, you want to fasten your seatbelt. Make sure you're sitting down. First of all, the line that we're going down, bishop takes c5, is equal after... Sorry, bishop e7 is what I proposed. Bishop takes f3 equal. Unbelievable. It's saying black is slightly better after king to d5. Can you believe that?
Well, the two ones are very strong, of course, but you would expect the bishop to be able to handle them.
It's just that white is one tempo short and black is playing c3. Maybe this is more obvious than I'm making it out to be, and I'm just dumb. I mean, not maybe. I know that to be the case, but rook to e8, which, of course, is not a difficult move in itself. I was worried, though, about the move c3 in response. The problem for black is that you just play king f2 now, and the pawn reaches c2, congratulations, but it's going to be picked off methodically with bishop to g7 takes d4. So the knight is just not a reliable defender of the pawn. So Fabi's just like one move away from winning this game if he finds rook e8, which, knowing Fabi, I think he's very good when you need one very precise move like this, generally.
I mean, it's not the easiest move to make, but as you point out, it makes perfect sense. You're freezing the bishop in its tracks. Knight takes h4. Let's say you try to grab all the pawns. It feels like there has to be some kind of issue with rook d8, king c7. There's bishop d6 check, not to mention bishop takes c5.
He's found it.
Fabi's such a beast.
And honestly, like, to find this move, I think king f2 is the most natural. You have to properly evaluate bishop takes g4. Understand, wait a second, the c-pawn is not dangerous. And then go for it in a time pressure situation. Fabi always trusts his calculation, and he's got every reason to do so. You could even start with the rook c1 here. Imagine if Fabi finds that one as well. No, but that's too scary. He's going to go king f2, and he's going to win this game, barring a miracle.
Wow. Yeah, you're just running out of pawns to work with if you're
It's still dangerous. Actually, this is still
king e3 maybe.
c2 and rook b1. Okay, this is what Arjun saw. He's at rook b8. Knowing Arjun and having lost so many winning positions to him in blitz, he is getting excited at the prospect of activating his rook.
Wait, but how does this work? So king e3.
Okay, so you're centralizing your king. I push.
Rook c1.
Rook b1.
Rook c8 takes c5. Ah, but you rook d1 check at the end when I take your knight.
Yeah, so king steps back. Rook c5, rook c1. And if king d4, check, followed by promotion.
Yikes.
And, Fabi will be demoted in the tournament cross table if he goes for this. How do you actually stop? How do you deal with this pawn? I mean, rook d3 is pretty terrifying to play because it removes the final obstacle to promotion, but maybe you want to follow Dr. Tarash's dictum, put the rook behind the pawn.
But rook b2 check there?
Oh, knight e2?
I'm aiming
No,
for
but that's got to be winning. King g3.
Okay. So knight e2, you're just taking on e2 and taking on c3?
I'm
Is that what
going
you're
to
going
be
for?
really annoying. Take on b2, take on c3.
Mm.
You got to go here. And okay, I mean, with 3-on-1, I think white should realize the advantage.
Yep. I realize that you are correct and that this will not work out.
Can you say that? Realize the advantage? Sorry, that was a product of me doing Russian commentary earlier.
Yes, you can say that.
Because in Russian, that's
For
the way
sure.
you say convert your advantage. To realize your advantage.
Oh, speaking of realizing advantages, it looks like Gukesh Hikaru has gone for activity. He didn't even go for the h4 pawn.
Yeah, he's lost the plot here completely.
And it looks like Wei Yi is doing well to hold, just as a side note.
Okay, so I'm sure Chad is freaking out at the Hikaru game. Wait, what is so wrong about this? It's like plus 8 million? The eval bar is like higher than the Burj Dubai. Burj Khalifa.
Your references
Burj Khalifa.
Was not expecting that. But what is the actual, like, if black is a free turn, what's the move?
Hikaru doesn't want you to ask that question.
But it's an important question to ask nonetheless.
Not as important as can you adjust your fifth camera? I have no answer for you. I don't think there is an answer.
Like knight f4 maybe?
Okay,
I say
how do you make progress? Because like the onus is on white to make progress. Do you just go back to c6 or do you try to win by force with knight c8, which would be my instinct?
Knight c8 looks cool. I was thinking, what happens if I pin your knight with queen d2?
Oh yeah, you can do that, can't you? Queen a3. Yeah, but this is all like useless. These checks lead absolutely nowhere.
It's exactly what I'm thinking.
It's just empty words, just like certain commentators like to filling the air with a lot of blah 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 here. And once the checks run out, you have to make a move like this, and eventually your queen is going to be overloaded. Eventually,
knight b5.
Although here, I wouldn't necessarily give up b6 and f2, even if it's winning. I tried to find a way to win more convincingly.
What about knight c8 instead of knight b5?
No, this is no. This is comically lost.
Queen
d7.
Was wondering about that just now.
Queen c2.
Knight takes f2 will not work, I doubt.
Although, I mean, one gets the sense that white is something cleaner, but maybe not.
Well, knight f2, queen c8, queen g2 looks pretty good.
Oh yeah, excellent awareness. Okay, so that's one option. I'm sure there are other options, and you are not a big fan of these adventurous, like overly brazen options when you can collect your advantage. But what do you make of knight c8? Like, is there something wrong with this move?
What's your exact plan? Like, if queen back to d7?
Honestly, b6 was my idea.
Uh-huh.
But I understand that this
Mm.
is maybe unnecessary after like knight c5 or something.
Yeah, knight c5. You're gonna go knight a7 back, I assume. It's a sort.
Yeah. No, I don't like this. But the whole point was to avoid, was to win cleanly, and this actually is the opposite of that.
What if you continue being, your usual funny self? Knight c8, queen d7, knight e7 check.
So takes queen d3. We should explain to people like why even in a queen endgame, even if like wins h4, the king is safe enough. Like it's not the safest king, but I think it's safe enough. But are you sure this is easy?
Um, queen. So wait, so
Queen e4.
what was wrong? What was wrong with queen? Oh no, maybe not. I was saying queen to like b6, queen before queen d8, queen c7, but you queen e1 check. I'm realizing in these positions.
Dude, this is the stage of conversion that I hate. I hate this stage of conversion where you've done the hard work, seemingly, and yet there's just this one last step. Gukesh steps back with his knight. He goes knight to c6, and Hikaru tucks his king away. Okay, not out of being satisfied with his position, but out of complete necessity.
But what about queen d2 now?
Yeah, now it's even stronger. It's just Hikaru's just waiting to resign. I think you get the sense that he's given up hope.
Yeah, because your queen a3 idea that had some merit before now just b6, and you don't even have checks because the white knight's already on c6.
What if queen d5?
Um, knight b4.
Oh, lovely. And actually, here you get the perfect queen endgame where you don't give up any pawns, and this is just easy clap.
This is winning for sure.
Yeah. Well done. I mean, knight c6, right? One of those moves that is easy to look past because it doesn't, it doesn't have the spark of a beautiful move or like the panache of Fabi's rook e8, but this is a glue move. This is a move that does work.
Danya, can we
Yeah.
put the Magnus game up on the big board? Just the big board.
Absolutely. Ooh. On
Or
the
the
big
small
board,
board,
you want the
whichever.
Magnus game.
Doesn't matter. I just
Okay.
wanted to bring that up because I saw
It's on the
that
small
Wei
board.
Yi is in time trouble, and there's way more than immediately meets the eye in this position because it's rook, knight, and 6 pawns per side. That's the good news for Wei Yi. The bad news is there's several different targets in the position. G7 is stuck in place. The G6 square is white for the taking. E6 is a weakness, and you don't have time to take this A4 pawn in many of the positions. So it feels like Magnus is trying to squeeze a victory out of a slightly better position, but will he be able to? I mean, Wei does have good activity.
I'm going to be honest, like the time management has been, let's put it delicately, a work in progress. And I think sometimes the players just don't realize how fatal it can be to leave yourself with like 2 minutes for the rest of the game because they're so used to that extra time that they know it factually, but like emotionally, psychologically, like in terms of managing the decision making, they haven't fully adjusted to it. Magnus needs to adjust pretty quickly to the fact that his pawn is hanging and Wei Yi will have connected passers. So the eval bar didn't like the move king to e8, but I have no idea like what makes this 0.7 and why it was 0.25 moves ago.
It just maybe is a position where the black pieces get a bit stuck. Maybe there is something that black could have done to maybe force a draw or something like that. Because right now it looks anything but forced. And rook takes a4 isn't even a threat, is it? Because
takes
rook b6
forced.
is the follow-up.
And Fabi, by the way, he found the best move rook c1 just as a breaking news alert. Pretty amazing stuff. He is just firing on all cylinders, and he is like moments away, I think, from winning his second consecutive game. Sorry, Robert, I feel like I derailed you.
No, you're totally fine. Just every single game is interesting, and as you said, Fabi has just found a great move.
I'm going to put it on the small board.
Just trying to think, like, for Wait, is Gukesh's clock not moving? Yeah, it looks frozen.
Eric frozen. Let's see. Why is it frozen? Oh, sorry. Queen f3, king g8 played in the Gukesh game. I just minimized the board by accident. My bad. So
you're all good.
Gukesh played queen f3. Hikaru moved his king back to g8. And are we ready to finish this this bacchanalia with b6?
B6, knight E1? Then, yeah, knight E... Is there knight E1? Does that work? No, probably not, right?
Gukesh doesn't even want to ask the question. He's finishing the architectural design on the king side. And the Sistine Chapel is almost complete here. There's absolutely no hurry. That is such a debilitating realization for Hikaru. Right? That he has no way to generate counterplay. He has to sit and wait. And the enemies are coming from both sides. There's the knight e7, queen f8 checkmating pattern. And there's, of course, b6 and the pass b pawn.
And unlike in Hikaru's typical style, there's no way to drum up activity or threats against the white king. Gukesh's move g3, I think that was very mature. And now after knight c5, he needs to figure out how to push his b pawn. Maybe he needs to figure out where his knight belongs, because his knight on c6, it looks very strong, Danya, but in some positions it's kind of in the way. Like your queen might belong on c6.
It's like Daniel Naroditsky at a middle school dance. Like no matter where it goes, it just doesn't quite seem to belong. Now maybe you.
That was so sad.
It's
yeah. Why did you say that?
Funniest things are true. I mean, demonstrating self-awareness never hurt.
Oh, that just made me sad.
But you know what makes me happy? The fact that I get to watch these games and this action unfold all at the same time with the best commentator in the business.
You got tears and hearts coming in the chat right now. So
my chat's not loading. My chat actually my chat is crying. All right, I know who we need to invite here.
Someone just said Dancia.
Dancia. Okay, can I demonstrate why I was nervous about Fabi's move, like in my mind?
Yes.
And maybe we can actually tease out his idea, because bishop b7, I know that we don't have the analysis board. It's occupied by Gukesh's game, but I'm just going to quickly put this on the board. So bishop b7, then intermezzo. I take the rook on c1. How do you stop the c-pawn, given that your rook is hanging?
Okay, rook d8. Bishop h6 at the end, right?
Yeah, but knight b3.
All right, I'll give up my bishop for your c-pawn, I assume. And h5?
h5. Oh, so you just like say, okay, promote. Congratulations, and now you can resign after g5.
Yes.
Very lovely, very instructive. And look at that bishop on b7, how bad it is. And how nice the f3 pawn is at just completely taking the bishop out of commission.
Brutal.
And Fabi calculated just that very same line. If you start with c2, that is a dead end as well. After king f2, it's easy to observe that. We had this on the board, actually, through a different move order. Bishop g7 is a pre-move.
Yeah, although it was harder before because the pawn was in c3 and there was like rook b8, rook b2 stuff. Mm-hmm. Now it's just simple because bishop g7 takes knight is automatic.
And that is exactly why delaying king f2 is so accurate. Because it cuts out the rook b8 counterplay that maybe was the last practical chance. Look at us predicting the final few moves of the game. Well, look at you. Because the key move is bishop h6.
Well, it's sometimes difficult to find these ideas because we're so attached to immediate material. We're like, white is ahead in exchange. Why should white give up the bishop? So it's going to be rook against two minor pieces. That sounds scary, but it's about the quality of the passed pawns. And black had the best one on c3, but that one's going to be captured for the bishop. And then white's pawns, they start running.
And Gukesh paying homage to a Soviet conversion method. I think someone like Radmir Holmov, or Isaac Boleslavsky would be proud. Like, look at the patience. King g2, g3. It is just a well-oiled machine in operation here as Gukesh. He's not just doing this to enjoy his position. He is doing this because he's facing one of the most inventive, one of the most dangerous defenders of all time. And he understands that investing a couple more moves, a couple more minutes to eliminate any remaining tricks will pay itself forward hundredfold when Hikaru tips over his king.
Yeah, just all the endgame legends would be proud of these types of moves. Ulf Anderson can join that.
Gukeshlikov.
The list of luminaries that you just provided everybody. But Fabi's doing well. Gukesh is doing well. Do you mind, Danya, if on one of the boards, maybe on the Fabi board, real quick, we just pop up the Sarah Kanem game against Humpy Canero, just because it looks like Humpy will have a knockout in the next couple moves. I just wanted to just show that Black has no mobility, no activity, and White can just put like G5, Rook G1, and maybe start with Rook G1 is probably more precise, but just throw everything at the Black King.
The only thing to avoid is Knight D6 and Bishop B4. Don't fall for, the cheap material off ramp when you can just go for checkmate. All of your pieces are worth their weight in gold. This bishop on C3 is absolutely not worth giving up for the rook on F8. In the meantime, Queen F4 from Gukesh. Fabi is going down the line that we just laid out, so there's nothing interesting happening there. Arjun is going to come to terms with the hopelessness of his defensive task pretty soon, I think. And Humpy, one more big decision away, I think, from winning this game.
Yeah, I mean, even what you're saying, Knight D6, Bishop B4, take on F8, like White's still winning.
Yeah.
It's like no matter what you do, it seems hard to kind of mess this one up for Humpy. She's played a great game, and Sarah never had any space in her position. So we could maybe just leave them for a second. Maybe we could bring up the Magnus game against Wei Yi.
Yep.
Wei Yi's got a minute 27. And Danya, how many times have we seen games where it's like, oh, Magnus with the slightest of slight advantages, there's nothing to it. And then you look at the clock, you look at the position, you say there's actually much more life in it than a simple draw. How careful does Wei Yi need to be, and not just on the clock, I'm talking about on the board?
Well, you don't need to look further back than the first round. It was a pretty shoddy opening by Magnus. Gukesh is in the driver's seat. He's going to be pressing Magnus all game. Whoa, wait a second. It's a sharp endgame. Okay, Gukesh is in control. Wait a second. It's tactical. Gukesh is in time pressure. Okay, he's figured out all the tactics. No, wait a second. Magnus mates him. You come at the king, you better not miss. It was a valiant effort by Gukesh, but Magnus is the king of, of war of attrition, right? He backs up and then stings at you again. He backs up another wave of attack. And the position is actually not clarifying at all. Actually, quite the opposite, Robert. It's going to get tactical any second now.
And a big problem for Black that's on the board underneath my camera, as well as Danya's, is that Rook B6 check. It's such a hard move to meet because the knight on A5, it's doing a great job of defending the B7 pawn, but that means it can't move back into the center of the game. And that means that Rook B6 will be a really nasty threat if Black is not careful, because the Black king needs to stay attached to the E5 pawn. And we're mentioning all sorts of pieces and squares and ideas because Wei Yi has less than a minute and a half, and every single move that requires some thought, you'll get 10 seconds of increment, Danya, but that 10 seconds, it runs out when you really need to calculate.
Yeah, and the time dilation, I remember from physics class, and Hikaru for a second I thought blundered his queen, but no, it's a check to Gukesh's king. Now knight E7's a threat, and Hikaru tucks his king away in the nick of time.
Wait, but knight E7 still, and queen F7, queen C8?
Ding dong. I think the Wicked Witch here of the West will meet with his death after knight E7. I love this move, and this idea that we illustrated so many moves ago, Robert, like really when they went into this endgame, potentially will become one of several factors that, taken together, Black's already overextended defensive forces cannot deal with. Too many threats.
I just feel like Black runs out of moves quickly because the queen on F7, knight on E7, that configuration. Maybe White can even, if he has time, play G4, G5 and just go for checkmate. That might be over ambitious and exposing the White king unnecessarily. But the point is that it seems like Black hardly has active plans and White can just sort of dominate the remaining pieces.
Yeah, and Gukesh is doing to Hikaru what Arjun did to him yesterday, right? He is letting that time advantage work for him, right? When you're up 30, 40 minutes, you want to use that, right? You want to pause on every moment. You want to double, triple check. I mean, use all the time that you have. Why rush? I mean, you've already invested 3 hours, 4 hours of effort. What's another 5 minutes to make sure that nothing crazy happens to cancel out what would be a very important win for Gukesh's confidence?
Gukesh needs it. He started with 2 losses in classical chess, and we know how that's going to impact him. But right now, we see that Gukesh is in the driver's seat. We also see that Wei Yi is hanging in tough against Magnus Carlsen. So why don't we step away from the Magnus game, put Fabi's game back up, because there actually are some critical moments ahead here. Arjun, he's so tactically alert and so tricky. Like, he brought his king up to c5, and I'm wondering what's he doing. I think that he's trying to bring his king in. I think he's trying to bring his king into c3.
So, like the obvious move to me is rook d7. Is there a concrete trick there, or is he going to go bishop c6, try to ward the rook away, and then at the right moment play like c3, knight d2? Is your ultimate idea to interfere with the bishop?
That's exactly it. I thought that, I was wondering with bishop e3 check, for example, like, where's your king going? Back to c6? That does nothing. Then the g-pawn runs.
So will you go here?
I think he's running forward. Yeah, rook b8, king c3.
Oh my gosh. And knight d2 is the idea. Are you kidding me?
And it said that white was still winning before rook takes bishop, so it's probably like rook back to d8 or king e1 or something. Yeah, exactly.
It's not good. Oh, bishop f3. So maybe king e1 actually is crucial. No, this loses too. Here I can just start chomping away at your pawns.
Wow.
So there is some ridiculous move here that wins the game for white.
Maybe g5, knight d2, rook d8.
No, I just promote.
Still no.
Promote. Knight d2, rook d8, I promote.
The bishop takes d2?
No, queen d2, takes.
Yeah, g6.
c3 even. I mean, hg and c3.
Yeah, I thought g6, h6, but you're right. You have a c-pawn that's the second c-pawn that's promoting.
I didn't give you the credit you deserved. I mean, you calculated all the way to this moment. I can also play h6 and stop the pawn like this. So there are...
Wow.
Why would I ever think that Arjun is out of resources? I mean, this man is never out of resources. And you know what his biggest resource is? Fabi is under 3 minutes. And when these thoughts start swirling in your head, panic can set in no matter how winning you are. Like, it doesn't matter how overwhelming your advantage. If you see ideas like this and they start affecting your thought process, I mean, man is capable of anything. Trust me, I've screwed up more winning positions than this. Well,
I think that
Gukesh's position, I don't think anybody, even in the chat, can screw up.
That's what I was going to say, is that
Check,
looks
check,
queen f5 check.
And knight g6 will seal the deal. Beautiful.
Yes, indeed. Extra piece for Gukesh. It's going to be his first win of the event. And for Hikaru Nakamura, it's going to be a sad result after a fantastic day yesterday. I mean, Danya, his play, Hikaru's, throughout this event, great against Fabiano, very shaky against Magnus, both in the Classical and the Armageddon. And today, it just really wasn't his day.
And for Gukesh, like, much is made. Okay, you lost to Fabiano. You lost to Caruana. Sorry. Oh my God. He's like, Fabiano's like a demon. I'm possessed. You lost to Carlsen. You lost to Nakamura. Big deal. It's a 10-round event. He's the world champion. He's proved himself in the longer marathon events time and time again. It took him a while to get, to find his center, literally and figuratively, but he just had a statement win, stopping Hikaru from running away with the tournament early. What a victory. Congratulations to Gukesh. And in his place, we will have a no less worthy matchup between Magnus and Wei Yi, which continues to, like, puzzle me. Like, I don't understand what's going on. What is white aiming for? Is this going to be a draw? Under a minute is Wei Yi. The Chinese grandmaster is flirting with disaster, and maybe successfully so.
I think Magnus is doing a brilliant job of creating complications where it would seem like there were none. Because as soon as that a2 rook finds an open file, you have to be really on red alert. And so the knight comes back to c5 for Wei Yi. Like rook b2, if you take on a4, there's a rook b6 check going on. The knight can come to f5 or g6, depending on how black responds. So Magnus, I mean, he's taking some tremendous risk here, Danya. This is not a position where he's just playing for a win. He could lose this game if he drops the a-pawn, and then there's 2 on none for black on the queen side.
Yeah, 2 on John Nunn. And he is the author, incidentally, of some great books on the endgame. I think Magnus is playing primarily for checkmate. Like, his primary aim is to mount an attack on Black's king with rook d2. What? Just an inventive concept. His secondary aim is to go after the g7 pawn. If that pawn is eliminated, obviously, the long-term investment, right? Driving the pawns to g4 and h5, it pays off. Wei Yi still grabs the pawn. Fearless. What's his intended response here, Robert? Is it e4 and knight d3?
But rook c2.
Okay, b6 or something?
Then knight takes g7 check. I mean, this is both sides have real risk here.
Well, Black's king can get to g5, and in the blink of an eye, things could turn around, as you said, to Black's advantage. Magnus, you better not miss. And Fabiano is actually doing everything beautifully here. Yes, and
for
rook takes the beautiful tactic.
That's very, very nice for everyone watching, because you typically take with the less valuable piece with bishop takes d2, but that would be a blunder. Rook takes d2, tactically speaking, stops Black from queening.
Well, knowing Arjun, he's going to actually promote and try to go c2, but all of that is, at this point, it's actually futile. And what an idea. I'll put this on the board, knight d2, rook takes d2, and one final flourish with one queen being taken off the board and a queen of a different color appearing in its place.
Arjun. It's funny because Black wouldn't even get the white rook in that scenario.
Oh yeah, like white keeps everything. All of the Christmas presents are scurried away and secured. Yeah, Arjun will try to go h7, c2, but even that is completely lost.
Indeed. Okay, so what's going on in the Magnus game over here? Wei Yi down to 27 seconds, Danya. It's past move 40, so the players gain 10 seconds with every move they make. But Magnus is clearly trying to get some kind of rook d2 going on, but you mentioned tactical ideas with knight d3 and pawn to e4. It's a spicy game still, and Magnus, he could be trying too hard to win, and it could result in a loss. If
Magnus's time, it just like never runs out, ever. He just has an endless time advantage.
It seems like that, doesn't it?
It really does. Like, he's been thinking forever. Wei Yi has been moving instantly, and he's still 6 minutes up, which feels like an eternity. So you're lobbying for knight takes g7, king f6, and then what exactly? Knight e8?
No, I'm actually lobbying now for rook d2 to start with.
But then I go knight d3?
And then I go knight g7.
So boom, boom. Oh, another accurate move by Fabi. Not even allowing simultaneous promotion, just going to take the bishop and swing the rook to c7, give it up for the pawn. And Arjun's going to give up the game here.
And it almost looks like for Arjun, he's got like knight d3 back to c5, and that c pawn looks dangerous, but the white king is in step with that passer. So well done by Fabiano. And here comes the knight to e4 for Wei Yi. That feels like a risky move. I understand the rook, the knight protecting each other, but somehow it feels like these pieces, if they can kick them in the right way, Black's setup is a bit clumsy.
Wei Yi is so good.
He really is.
He's just so good. I mean, how has he managed to hold on here? Not just hold on, but thrive. And it might be white who's in the sort of defending side's chair. Once the knight starts checking the king on g5, you cannot afford to give up the g4 pawn, because once you lose that pawn, your entire kingside campaign comes crashing down. And I got these two little demons over here just waiting to have their moment in the sun.
So what's happening here? Knight g7, king f6, rook to d7. It feels like there's going to be chaos, and I am worried about Wei Yi's clock, but he's been playing amazing chess, and he did win that Vaikonze, the Tata Steel tie breaks against Gukesh, if I remember correctly. So he has experience in really stressful moments to try to win a title, and this game is very stressful indeed.
Well, there might be chaos. There also might be some sort of a repetition of moves, with the white king needing to stay between g3 and f3. Chaos and repetition in Las Vegas. And yeah, Magnus has been the hunter in this game, and Wei Yi has been the hunted, but I am afraid that Magnus is not seeing a way to keep this game at the level of complexity that you would need to keep it for Wei Yi's clock to become the decisive factor.
Well, Wei Yi has the benefit that a bunch of his next moves are forced, which will gain him 10 seconds turn after turn. It might reach back to a minute. And then the A and B pawn, those two, they can get rolling. That would be really not good for the world number one, Magnus Carlsen. So, Donna here, Magnus is thinking, what? Okay, did you see
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I did. It flew up for. I mean, I really don't like that bug, but it happens from time to time.
Oh my goodness. That was like knight takes h6. What? What?
Yeah, the DGT board just had a mini midlife crisis, end of life crisis, because this game might be nearing its end. Like King G3 knight e4. You can't go back to G2, I think, because of Rook A2. I don't think Magnus is making it happen.
But then king f3 after rook a2?
Yeah, well then knight G5 at a minimum.
Ah, you just found a nice repetition. Okay, so king f3, knight g5.
Yes.
I'm trying to find something, but I'm not. I feel like Magnus could get in trouble if he tries too hard.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, he lost the Armageddon yesterday. He was frustrated. That doesn't mean he's gonna tilt his way to a needless loss in the classical game. I mean, Magnus losing with white is a big occasion, and he ain't gonna let that happen easily.
And Fabi winning with white is a big occasion because Fabiano, who lost with white to Hikaru Nakamura, everyone was sort of digging Fabiano's grave, and now he's won two in a row. He's the Undertaker now. He is revived, resuscitated, and now he, I think, actually is topping the leaderboard.
And we will resuscitate the live board analysis board because in the open we have just this Magnus game, which soon might turn into a different Magnus game. They will be contesting an Armageddon. I don't know what's going on in the women's section. Haven't been able to check.
I got you covered. What's happening there is Humpy did in fact win, and Ju Jun drew that game against Vaishali. You said it was locked up. It should be a stable game from Vaishali. She did hold it, so they will have Armageddon.
And she'll need to hold the black, but you do get draw odds. We will likely have two Armageddons as finally, after what seems like an eternity, Magnus's time advantage is dwindling. Just to put this on the board, now that we have our live board, like the problem that we were talking about is King G2 runs into Rook A2. White's only available check is this like completely useless check on E8. And if White tries to zigzag his way out of Black's checks, you're not gonna succeed. You know, like this is too high of a price to pay. And I think they're repeating three times.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you that continuation King G2 or whatever happened with the 98, however you got to that line, it felt like there was one last attempt for Magnus, but probably too risky, and the game is a draw. So, Dunn, if you could somehow get there.
Yeah. Like 98, this is what I was just putting on the board, yeah?
Yeah, like King E6, Rook H7.
Yeah, it takes.
King G1. Like, what? You take H6, it looks kind of scary, but it's probably asking for trouble.
Yeah, Magnus would rather be solid. It's too early in the tournament, I think, to justify this level of risk. But maybe this will remain behind the scenes. But the upside is that we will get another Magnus Armageddon. And after yesterday's crash and burn, Magnus has a chance to redeem himself.
He does. And Magnus, as well as Ju Jun and Vaishali, Magnus versus Wei Yi, these will be our Armageddon matchups. But wow, Wei Yi deserves so much praise. The way he was able to fend off all avenues of infiltration with minimal time on his clock. I mean, Wei Yi, he's been a beast. He's been around for a long time now, but that was very impressive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we are so used to Magnus driving the point home, especially in his opponent's time pressure. Things seem to be going wrong here. Magnus was making money moves, and this Rook C3, this one inaccuracy, allowing Wei Yi to clear off some of the pieces, chase the knight away, and then trade queen. I mean, so many accurate moves here. This isn't going to like win any brilliancy prizes, but it should definitely win our admiration because defensive efforts like these don't get enough love.
In this position, done knight G6 check, King E6, right?
Yeah.
There's a funny sequence here. If Rook B6 check, Rook C6, D5 looks good, but I don't think it works out because after D5, King takes D5, Knight E7 check. That's a fork.
C5, wow.
But King C5 hits that. You know what's funny about this game is that B6 square has been White's for the taking, but it's also been the source of many issues where there's been plenty of tactics where like the Queen D8 tactic earlier we were looking at, where the piece on B6 gets hit at an inopportune moment and allows Black to survive.
And ultimately, White's like positional trump cards, and there were many of them on both sides of the board. They don't amount to anything. Like you just sit on the position and sit on the position, but ultimately, like you just don't squeeze anything out of all of those assets that you were so patiently accumulating. And so we will get Magnus Carlsen. The colors are maintained in the Armageddon, so it's 10 on 7, 10 minutes to 7, with a 1 second increment kicking in for move 40, not a 10-second increment. In the Armageddon, it's only a 1 second increment, much to the chagrin of the players who are, big fans of the cushy time limitation. So I'm going to put the Ju and June game on the smaller board and expand it. And we will be observing. I assume both games should start about the same time. I'm going to take a few more bites of my...
Yeah, I was going to...
okay. We'll just go for a small break maybe until the games begin.
Yeah, I was going to step aside for a second just because, well, I've been seated here for 4 hours straight.
Take as long as you need. I'll hold down the fort and be back very shortly if the games begin.
Sweet. I'll be back in a little bit. Just kind
Yeah, now my screen can hear you. I'm just eating a little bit, but
Donnie, you're
I'm
muted if you're talking, but I do see you.
Sorry, I'm just eating a little bit, but I'm still listening, and the games haven't started yet, as I'm seeing it.
Nope, I don't see any games yet.
What's up, people? As you saying?
People are telling me not to read the chat. Not sure why.
It's always a good sign when the chat tells you not to read the chat.
Yeah, probably horrible.
Unthinkable.
Hey, you got a prime there, Danya. I see that just trickled in.
Yeah, I've been neglectful with thanking subs.
I actually thanked them for you. You didn't see this yesterday, but I was in your chat, and every time I saw one, I would thank them and type out a thank you and
Oh,
say on your behalf.
well, it's always good to have a considerate commentator skilled in the art of thanking people for a good deed. But we really appreciate the support. Obviously, we would appreciate a camera angle from the tournament hall, but one thing at a time. One thing at a time.
Yeah, that would be good to be able to get those right so we could just get the players, the reactions, the confessionals, all that good stuff. But maybe that's a future dream. Now we just chat about the games.
Never say never, man.
Someone said, "Well, wholesome Hess and disrespectful Danya." That's
That's
funny.
right. Well, the two alliterations in one. Okay, so it's funny. The regulations dictate that the games must start within 20 minutes, I think, of the classical concluding. So I think the Vaishali game has been over for a while.
Same.
But generally, the players, I think, are ready to go. Like they don't need a super long break, and you don't want to do something where it's neither this nor that. Like either start the games quickly or like 2 hour break. But that would also make it completely impractical for the commentators because they would have to return to the studio and
Well, I guess there are tons of considerations on the ground with probably interviews that need to be done. I'm sure Magnus has like TV2 and NRK and all those Norwegian channels. So I'm get no, I'm serious. I'm
yeah,
guessing
I know. I'm just laughing because it's just a funny situation.
but you laugh like yourself, so I got confused because you haven't been laughing in that way.
Yeah, I've been laughing like Wesley. I'm playing
Also,
like Wesley.
someone just subbed to your channel for 30 months, AL747, and said
Oh,
wholesome Hess. Look how cute that is.
and cute and true. Good combination. Thanks again for holding the fort down. You're the real hero of today's and yesterday's show.
Well, you don't need to knight me, but I was happy to do so.
Damn girl. Okay, I'm looking at the camera. I mean, they're still on a break, so it looks like the board is set up. Everything is ready. Seatbelts are fastened. Like you said, I don't know what it's like to have a TV channel dedicated to covering only me. Like, what must that be like? I'm sure Magnus is used to it. Like, you get used to everything. You get used to fame. So it must be sort of second nature for him, but I can't even fathom what that must be like. I mean, the entire country like exists to like serve as a fan background for Magnus Carlsen.
Well, I think they've done statistical research on it, and like a huge percentage of the country of Norway like stopped what they were doing to watch him play in the World Championship. I don't remember the exact numbers, but yeah, he's an absolute hero there. Deserves to be. I mean, he is an elite chess player, and he's got many, many fans. But with that comes obligations, of course.
Yeah. I mean, obligations to sometimes force a smile, to give that extra interview when you've just lost in Armageddon and you just want to say a bunch of things that would probably get the TV channel dedicated to you taken off the air. So it ain't easy, but he's following, as he himself has admitted, in the footsteps of Hikaru, who has really transformed himself into a camera savvy individual. I think we've sort of watched that transformation unfold, and it's pretty impressive because that's a skill completely separate from moving your knights and bishops in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you don't even know how to move the knight. You get asked that question on the big stage, and
Good
yeah,
one.
it might move in the L shape, but can never be too certain. When are these games starting, do we think?
It's like
Because
the American Cup. What
yeah,
are they doing right now? Like, okay, they gave the interviews, but shouldn't the interviews be given after the Armageddon?
yes, but I feel like sometimes in sports you see that, right? You're going into overtime. Coach, how you feeling about that last possession? Oh well, we didn't play defense and they hit a three. That stunk.
down the stretch. Now show me the darn game rather than the split screen view of Rick Carlisle complaining, which he's not doing a lot of.
I'm just thanking your chat, by the way. You're not seeing any of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have the chat open. It's just I have so many things to keep track of. I have the YouTube chat open. I am giving those guys and gals some love. As for the
You just
Twitch
got
chat,
3,000 bits
oh my goodness, why can't I? Okay, let me just open it then.
by Dunya 89.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I am not
Ooh,
worthy.
and thank you to differential forms. Speaking of calculus and math,
I actually do have four monitors this time because I have two monitors plus iPad, which is not in use right now, plus my phone. And I'm like cycling between all the windows and trying to keep track of the games. Now I've opened the Twitch chat. Thank you, Dan Parby, Der Parby, for the Prime. I also can't read apparently, so there's that.
You've had a long day speaking multiple languages, broadcasting tons of Blitz games, and then some classical, and now we're getting some rapid. Oh, I see that we have a game.
Move is coming in on the left side for you guys, on the right side for me, actually. But Magnus still putting the finishing touches on his NRK interview. But look at Ju and June. What the heck is this exchange French with a knight on c3? Is that the new fashion?
I'm just quickly looking at their classical game. It was knight f3 knight, same thing, except there was a knight that bishop was on b4 before she went bishop d3 in their classical game. So a weird change, I would say.
Instead of knight b4, she went bishop b4.
Like she went bishop, white went bishop d3 after bishop to b4.
Oh, but this allows a3. I mean, Vaishali just forgot about this. This is a classic idea where knight takes c2, and you will not escape the dragon's lair. That's a horrible, horrible start for Vaishali. Now, knight c6 is forced. A knight takes d5. She will win the pawn back, but I'm not even sure that she should. That might be worse than just developing and taking the L.
You know, you can get some sort of Scandinavian type of position after bishop h2, queen d5, like castle queenside. White objectively is so much better, but you get some quick activity. And I would say the best thing that Vaishali can do is play quickly because Ju Wenju needs to prove her advantage. It's not just about having a bishop pair on an open board. White needs to win this game, and Vaishali cannot afford to let her clock keep ticking.
Knight b4, just look. There's something about that move which felt off. And indeed, bishop h2 played. Well, every position is technically a Scandinavian position because they are playing from Stavanger.
That was very well done, my friend.
I appreciate it. It's on my last legs here, but king takes h2 would be my instinct. Why? Because after queen d5, the pawn on d4 is protected, but c2 c4, as tempting as it is, allows the queen to step back with check. And I think what you're talking about is exactly what they're playing out. Queen d6 and long castle, and John Bartholomew would voluntarily take a position like this with black. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but it's still a game. Wow, the doesn't think so.
Well, white's going to play queen d4, threatening g7 and a7 at the same time. So white is cruising. Objectively speaking, white is doing extraordinarily well. But I think what Vaishali needs to do is acknowledge her position's bad and just start making moves in a flurry, right? Just hope that it's good enough because she's objectively just toast right now.
Yeah, queen d4 is a pretty significant game changer, though. I think without this resource, if black had gotten the knight out, okay, it's a tolerable position. There's nothing tolerable about what is about to befall her on both sides of the board. No, this is just yeah, she's just toast here.
How do you even survive? Like g7's hanging, ace queen a7 hurts.
Playoffs?
It's g7, queen a7, pawn to c5, bishop to f4. All of these moves are going to hurt you, and
a quadruple attack. Yeah, not a double attack, quadruple attack.
Bishop f4, queen b6, queen e5, game over.
Damn, you work fast. And then c5.
Well, just destruction.
Oh my gosh. Well, bishop f4, queen b6, queen e5. I move the bishop back, and then I assume you have c5 in mind.
Yes, because you can't take as the rook comes to the c file.
No, this is too easy. I mean, you're just developing your pieces.
Yeah, this is not how Vaishali drew it up. Is there even a move that makes things complicated right now? Because Queen B6, as you said,
C5
pawn C.
maybe?
Ooh. So C5, Queen E3?
You said make things complicated, not make things good. Like, or better.
Your reaction was very funny. You're like, ooh. But actually after Queen E3, Queen B6, like
Queen
B4,
E5.
maybe you have Knight D7, just
You just need to hang on. Yeah, I think you have to go C5, but I just feel even, thousands of miles away, the hopelessness just like creeping. Yeah, no, now C5 and Queen E5 in any orders. No, this is not going to go into her best games collection, that's for sure. This is a clunker of a game for Vaishali from the very first moves, really.
yeah, and these type of games, they just feel really bad because you're like, what was I thinking? Did I really assume that Ju Wenjun, who's been in phenomenal form in recent months, winning the Women's World Championship, losing to the first game, Danya, and then going into full just demolition mode, just destroyed her opponent. And that was Tan Jung Yi is an amazing player, but against Ju Wenjun in that match, it just felt like she had no chance.
Yeah, she's just a wrecking ball. Queen E6 even, I thought. But even something like Rook A to D1 in response, reinforcing the threat of D is just devastating. Now, I don't want to, this is painful to look at. Ju Jun is a well-oiled machine, and it was just naive, right? Vaishali played naively thinking that Bishop F5, too good to be true. And it was too good to be true. World champions don't miss things like that. And another Jabava London in the meantime for Mr. Carlsen. I will replace the Vaishali game with an instance of the Magnus game once that game ends. And they're going down one of my favorite lines that I actually analyzed extensively in the course, where the white knight typically comes to E5 quickly, Robert, turning our attention to the big board. Mm-hmm. And you go long castles here as Ju Jun seals the deal in 19 moves.
Wow.
Well done to her.
That was, unfortunately for Vaishali, way too easy for Ju Wenjun, but she'll take it. She'll secure 1.5 points for the match, and Vaishali will take her FIDE points because drawing against Ju Wenjun, that does earn her maybe a little over one ELO point. But let's talk about the game we have here, Danya. You have literally
it's my neck of the woods,
here.
Man. My neck of the woods. Knight C6, Bishop B5 is a very nasty line.
And we see it capture on D4, Knight C6 first. You're saying Bishop B5 here, or was it only before the capture on D4?
I mean, it's a move here too, and the idea is to meet Knight B4. Better than in Vaishali's game, but you just drop the bishop back to A4. Now, if Magnus wants to play more sort of positionally, he could take on C6 and stick his other knight on A4, which may appear like to send mixed signals, like you've played H4, but no, Bishop B5 is where the party's at. And if Wei Yi is not armed to the teeth here, this is going to get nasty. D takes E5 now is the move, I'm pretty sure.
So this is all directly from your
course. Our course, yeah. Castle's queenside is the move.
So I'm going to ask you a question that's going to make you feel bashful. He took on D7. Do you think Magnus has looked at your course?
No, otherwise he wouldn't have played this crappy move. Well, this slightly suboptimal move.
Or he knows he needs to win the game, so sometimes the suboptimal moves objectively are practically good decisions.
Now, I'm pretty sure that like long castles, knight takes E5, it's one of our like proudest lines because you can force black to find like a bunch of only moves there to equalize. However, okay, now that I have trashed Magnus's choice of bishop takes D7, it's time for me to, take all of my words back and turn them around by 180 degrees because the pawn is hanging. The main idea for white is to go G4 and H5, just like in any Sicilian. Yeah. And all right, good luck, Wei Yi.
Good luck to you. I mean, look at this, right? E6 to protect D5 feels natural, but the natural moves are often the ones that you regret the most because G4, H5, as you said. Whoa. So Rook A8 giving up D5.
Saakashvili. Actually, that was the president of Georgia, Saakashvili. Literally.
Wait, so Rook C3, Queen D7, Rook C2.
King B1. one. No,
And
rook
then
takes
some
g2.
rook takes g2. Exactly. That's
Bad.
huge.
You have to play
From a
bc, but queen a4.
Yeah, but you know what this reminds me of? What was it? Vidit against Fallujah, where Fallujah played this very sharp Sicilian line and it double exclam rook takes d3. It's thematic, but this is a really complicated position. But what I was going to say is Fallujah couldn't remember all the details, and Vidit scored a nice victory against him. So sometimes these lines are objectively good for one side, but they're not easy to figure out. What
He goes for the end game, needing to, again, white needs to win the Armageddon game. How is he planning to win an endgame down a healthy extra pawn? It's with rook d7, but no.
Ooh. Wait, but how does black deal with this?
Rook
'Cause
f2?
rook takes rook f2, rook e7,
Rook f3.
bishop g5.
But
Yeah, this doesn't. Okay, wait, so rook f2, maybe rook g1 to start. Does that tempo help?
well, I would throw it in for sure in like a blitz game, but king h7.
And then rook e7, there'll be e6 ideas if you're not super careful.
Wei's going for the forced draw. He wants to go rook c4, and he wants to end Magnus's hopes before they even begin.
Sorry, where's the force draw?
I don't know. I think he's about to demonstrate it to us.
Because that bishop
I
can
don't
always go
know.
back to c1. Well, I don't love this decision because now it's even material, Danya, and black's structure is clearly worse, and b7 is loose. E6 is not a threat now because b2 is hanging, but like if that rook moves from g2,
Wait,
you have to be very
rook
careful.
c2, there's rook takes bc. The problem is like bishop c1, I was trying to make some deflection sack work, and I assumed that Wei, when he played rook c8, he had a response prepared to this move, but apparently not. Apparently, or he may have missed something.
This looks so. I see that the evaluation bar is in the middle. This looks bad for me for the black side, but he must have, I mean, obviously, because the engine's in the middle. But there must be something here for black. Maybe b6. Like some of the saves that white has is because rook takes b7 protects b2. So maybe give up the a pawn rather than the b pawn.
But still, your point is, oh, b6 and then rook c2. Let me put this on the analysis board, the small board, really quickly here. I'm going to shrink it just so it fits inside our little box. We know who's playing. We don't need that. We know who's playing. And rook to c4 played. So, like, my initial instinct, after a deep think by Wei, he plays rook c4, bishop c1. Good call, Robert. That is indeed his choice. So, b6, I think, might have been the secret sauce.
If you refresh the big board on your screen for a second,
Yeah.
oh, you did refresh. Sorry, no. But what I don't like about this is now that when white plays f3 to f4, like you've protected the e5 pawn, which is dangerous for multiple reasons, namely the b2 ideas of the rooks. I feel like white just has a safe pawn structure, and black's king is weirdly the one that can get in trouble. Like a rook d1, rook d8 is going to hurt you.
You know, the Magnus effect in full force here. It's a 5-minute time advantage, and we were like, I mean, the exchange sack, it like looks so good. It looks so convincing. The decision to go into the endgame looks almost like capitulation. But Wei with some hard work left to be done and not a lot of work to do it in b5. Your idea, well executed.
But what's happening after f4?
Yeah, I'm just like talking in platitudes, and Magnus is making moves. f4, bishop h6, maybe?
But then there's going to be rook d1 and e6 at some point, and black is getting back rank checkmated.
Well, maybe you're getting back rank checkmate. I'm going to back rank checkmate you in your face. How about that?
But you know what I mean? Like the black king is suddenly the one that's in danger.
Oh, totally. Totally agree. And it's all because of this bishop dropping back to c1. And rook h4, just, and opening up like an evacuation round, making sure that the h4 pawn doesn't cramp black's king, I think is a good investment. But such a scary move to play. Oh. And the bishop on c1 is under fire. King g6 and bishop h6 is threatened.
Wow. Although there's going to be checks on the 6th rank in those positions as well, or checks on g8. So both sides need to exercise caution. Magnus has more time, but objectively, at least, it looks like he's got a worse position. So down here, rook c7 here. Your point is that e6 can never be played because rook takes b2. That's actually sick.
Huge. But black can start pushing h4. How does white stop the black h pawn, which is only 3 moves away? It looks like an eternity. No, it's only 3 moves away from reaching h2, at which point white's got nothing to put in front of that pawn in the h1 square, and we know what happens if that square is reached. There will be no NRK interviews then.
Does White have to play like Rook D4 to H4 after the pawn gets to H3 and just try to survive that way?
But the moment the rook leaves the eighth ring, I think black's king. Let's also not forget this other idea. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa! Bishop H6. Is that the move missed? Bishop H6,
Bishop.
Rook F7 is his idea, but then Rook G7. Oh, King G6 first. Oh, Bishop H6. There was Pawn F4.
Wow.
But now the Rook has to move back to F4, and then Rook takes C1 and Bishop H6.
Yeah, that's got to be over.
Rook Rook DF8. Rook DF8. H4.
Wait, but Rook DF8, you just
No, Rook
take it?
Rook G8 check though. What's the idea here?
Sorry, what?
Bishop E5. Bishop E5 should be winning here. Oh, Rook G1.
Also this. Yeah, Rook C8, Rook takes C1, game over.
No. What I'm saying is like Bishop, if you played Rook takes C1 and Bishop H6 immediately, there was Rook D8 to G8 with a check.
Ah, very good find by you, yes.
Well, that's
And
what Magnus was relying on.
But Black only needed a draw in this game, but he's just gonna win.
Lost. He missed Rook G1. He relied on this tactic, but he's been losing control of this game since he confused the opening course, which shall go unnamed.
But what's interesting is that it objectively was equal. At least that's what it said. And now he made it himself. Rook A1.
Gosh, and he's down a piece and getting mated and needs to win this position.
And so King A2, Rook C1 back. Just make a draw that way.
Absolutely. Wei is a professional. He's not even... A win is meaningless here. A draw is a win. And Magnus extends his hand in disgust.
Oof.
A second consecutive Armageddon defeat from someone who just dominates the Armageddon normally. Wei
Wei's a beast. The way he's defended in both the classical and then here in the Armageddon, I mean, my goodness, his back was against the ropes. And Daniel, let's not forget that yesterday he lost to Fabiano, right? He was white. He came in probably with aspirations of winning. He went down in flames, and then he rebounds the next day by drawing the classical with black and then winning this Armageddon game. Just incredible stuff from Wei.
Wei for the win, and I mean, it's high time that he scored a tournament victory worthy of his strength, honestly. And these two games were worthy of their strength psychologically. And of course, just dominating Magnus in the tactical phase of the game. Things started to go from bad to worse here. After Rook takes H4, I mean, like we were saying, Robert, Bishop H6 right away is bad because of F4. So he starts with King G6. Now you don't want to go take C1 and Bishop H6 because of the skewer that would force the bishop back from H6, or you would have to give up an entire rook. But the critical detail is that you first start with Rook G1, and only in response to Rook C8 does the tactic actually work. Exchanging all the rooks, and Bishop to H6 seals the deal. Just divine level of play in time pressure, time and again by Wei Yi. And time for him to celebrate.
Can you go back a little bit to the point where Magnus went Rook D1 and allowed this Rook takes H4 move? Wei Yi seemed to be hanging on and playing really well anyway, but F4, I'm just curious what Black had prepared after F4, because Rook D1 to D8 is a big threat. And this Bishop H6 idea, while yes, you go after F4 pawn, you also leave your back rank very vulnerable. So just to put a sample line, Rook D1, Bishop takes F4 if you're going for this, then E6, that feels deeply unpleasant because you can't take as Rook D8 as a ladder checkmate.
And your intuition, as always, doesn't miss. King to G7 is the only way to keep a draw on the board. And apparently, because of the possibility of Black delivering back rank mate, the Rook on D1 is tied down. It's like you have to find a bunch of other moves. Rook G1 is met with Rook G4. So all of these details would have to be factored in. And after freezing and losing his time advantage yesterday, Magnus overcompensates. He rushed it by several minutes, and he had a 5-minute time advantage, and he spent none of it on these terrible moves. And Wei Yi makes him pay. He makes him weigh.
Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way. And for Wei Yi, he played a very good game here. He was not fazed by the Jabal London, the obscure variation that Magnus trotted out, and he played perfectly. Rook takes C3. He found all these good moves. Sure, the computer says he's better, and he instead went for the equalizing variation because a draw is equivalent to a win for the black pieces in Armageddon. But man, what a game that was. Disappointment for Magnus 2 days in a row.
Trying to get out of the theory and instead getting out prepared by Wei Yi, who understood that once Magnus played the Jababalonen against Gukesh, once he felt the calling to play the best opening, you need to cover all of your bases. Definitely Wei Yi probably prepared for this opening in the classical phase, and turns out to be absolutely critical in the Armageddon. Great stuff today all around. We've had one round after another of nonstop action. Nothing to complain about, even by the most picky chess fan.
Yeah, the I don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say. Just so much fun covering these games. I mean, every single matchup proved to be exciting. I actually didn't even get to see some of the action because I was so focused on the variety that we got to witness. But for example, I didn't see Lei Tingzhe and Anna Muzychuk in their Armageddon game, but that was a draw, so Anna Muzychuk gets the points. But Johnny, I'm just not even fully aware what the standings are at the moment.
Well, even if I was aware of the standings, the downside of this soccer scoring is that, like, when I see 6 out of 4 points and somebody else is 6.5 out of 4.5, I'm like, ugh. I will let the mathematicians do the mathematicking and the statisticians do the stats.
I got you covered. So Anna Muzychuk and Humpy Koneru are tied for first with 6 points in the women's, and Fabiano Caruana has been able to leapfrog his competitors. He's in clear first place with 6 points. He's won 2 classical games and, of course, lost the game to Hikaru, but he's the only player in Norway Chess with 2 wins in classical, and it's worth 3 points each. So that's allowed him to jump into first place.
Yeah, I'm showing the cross table here. Again, when you see 6 points, that doesn't mean there's been 6 games. There's only been 3 games, but 2 classical victories for Fabi. And whose bingo card was this on after round 1? That's unbelievable. He's in clear first.
What a comeback.
Make that make sense, man. After losing with white.
Just incredible. Just incredible. So, I don't know what else to say, Danya. I mean, it's been a fun slate of games. Who's playing tomorrow? Maybe we can just...
Yeah. Magnus versus Erigaisi.
Mm-hmm.
Fun matchup there. Another test for Arjun after losing today. Gukesh versus Fabi. This is the world championship Fabi never had, but might still have. And Hikaru versus Wei Yi. Wei Yi just doesn't catch a break, man. He gets a double black against Magnus and Hikaru.
Wow. This has been such a fun event and just more great games tomorrow. As you said, no breaks, no rest for any of the weary players, because what's your reward for beating Magnus Carlsen Armageddon? Black against Hikaru Nakamura. So that's rough. Arjun Erigaisi loses 2-5 on a Caruana. He gets black against Magnus. So Magnus gets the white pieces 2 days in a row. That's something that players usually would like to have, but maybe if you prefer to have the draw odds in Armageddon, playing with the black pieces in Norway Chess could be an advantage.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think black is considered an advantage in Armageddon almost universally by the top players, a consensus. So the Armageddon is as close as it gets to fair, but it does add that extra little bonus for holding your own of the black pieces, and we will be holding our own from the commentators booth, such as the plan. And Friday's a rest day, so we're moving closer to the first half of the tournament. Time is flying past our eyes. The games are so interesting. Great to see this kind of action. Really reinforcing our love of the game and showing us why the great players meeting in one room produces such fireworks.
For sure. So, Danya, thanks for joining today when you did. I know you had a lot to deal with the Hans and Dubov match, and tomorrow we're here from the start, same time, same place. That's 4 p.m. Where I am in the UK. It's 11 a.m. Eastern time. I think it's 5 p.m. local in Norway. Mm-hmm. But everybody, please just hit that follow button. Make sure that you're around in these next bunch of days. I guess on YouTube it's the subscribe button, and if you accidentally hit the subscribe button on Twitch, won't complain about that either. So the terminology gets me confused. But
press the button and press all the buttons available to press, and one of them will be the correct button. And give us your credit card number and your social security number and your grandmother's maiden name while you're at it.
I would not. Well, I don't want all those details, but the rest I won't complain about. But in the meantime, Danya, you're the man. Thanks for
Likewise. Thanks for holding it down, man. Tomorrow I'll be on site from the very beginning, and I owe you as many breaks as you need to get through some long days. So gratitude is all mine, and of course we're thankful for the very wholesome community watching us on all the channels.
I appreciate it. I'm done talking. I'm
Adios.
good. So
all
goodbye,
right.
everybody.